At my housewarming party, my daughter-in-law smiled and handed me a glass of wine. She said, "This is for Dad, a new beginning." I was about to take a sip when my granddaughter tugged at my sleeve. My son took my glass and drank it without a second thought. 20 minutes later, everyone started screaming because foam was bubbling from his mouth, and the look in my daughter-in-law's eyes wasn't fear for her husband. It was terror because the wrong man was dying. My name is Garrett Freeman. I am 68 years old, and for the last 40 years I have learned that silence is the loudest form of power. I spent 3 decades as a chief engineer for a major oil conglomerate securing patents that quietly generate more money in a month than most people see in a decade. But if you saw me walking down the street in my worn denim jacket and my scuffed work boots, you would think I was just another retiree trying to stretch a pension check. I never corrected that assumption. I wanted my son Terrence to build his own character to understand the value of a dollar earned with sweat, not handed over on a silver platter. But character is hard to build when you marry someone like Whitney. Whitney is 30 years old, white, with a smile that shows too many teeth and eyes that calculate the cost of everything they touch. She calls me Dad, but the word always sounds like she is speaking to a bank teller she is trying to charm. That Saturday was supposed to be a celebration. I had just purchased a 5-bedroom villa in the hills for them. It was a test, really. I had paid for the house in cash, but I hadn't signed the final deed over to Terrence yet. The papers were still sitting in my safe unsigned. I wanted to see how they handled the responsibility first. The house was filled with their friends, people who drank expensive champagne and parked leased luxury cars on the lawn I had paid for. I stood in the corner of the kitchen watching Whitney direct the caterers like she was royalty. She was wearing a white dress that looked expensive, and I knew exactly which credit card she had used to buy it. Mine. Terrence walked in from the patio. My boy looked exhausted. At 32, he should have been in his prime, but he looked worn down. He was sweating, his tie loosened, carrying a heavy box of decorations Whitney had demanded at the last minute. He had been unemployed for 6 months, though he thought I didn't know. He thought I believed he was still consulting, but I knew he was drowning in debt trying to keep up with Whitney's lifestyle. "Garrett, you are hiding in the corner." Whitney's voice cut through the noise. She glided over to me, hooking her arm through mine. Her skin was cool, her perfume overpowering. "You need to mingle. This is a celebration. We are so grateful for the house. It is perfect." "It is a nice house," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I hope you two can maintain it." "Of course we can," she said, her grip on my arm tightening just a fraction. "Terrence has some big deals coming up. We are going to turn this place into a showstopper." She pulled me toward the center of the room. The chatter died down as she raised a hand. "Everyone, please, I want to make a toast." The room went silent. Whitney turned to the marble counter where a single bottle of red wine sat. It wasn't the wine the caterers were serving. It was a dusty bottle of vintage Cabernet, one I recognized. It was from my personal cellar, a bottle worth $3,000 that I was saving for a special occasion. She must have taken it from my old house without asking. She poured a generous amount into a crystal glass. Her hands were shaking slightly, just a little tremor. I thought it was excitement. To Garrett, she announced, beaming at the crowd, "The patriarch of the Freeman family. Thank you for this beautiful home, to new beginnings and to the legacy you are building for us." She handed me the glass. Her blue eyes were locked onto mine, intense and unblinking. There was a pressure in her gaze, a silent demand. "Drink. Drink it now." I took the glass. The wine was dark heavy. "Drink up, Dad," she whispered, clinking her own glass against mine. "It is bad luck not to finish a toast." I raised the glass to my lips. The aroma was rich, masking something I couldn't quite place. I was a breath away from swallowing that first sip when I felt a small, sharp tug on my jacket. Pop, pop. A tiny voice squeaked. I looked down. It was Zuri, my 6-year-old granddaughter. She was the only pure thing in this entire mess. She was holding a drawing, her hair in messy braids, looking up at me with big, tearful eyes. "The doggy is outside and he is lonely," she said. "Come see him, please." I lowered the glass. "Zuri, honey, I am in the middle of a toast." "He is crying," she insisted, tugging harder. Whitney's smile faltered. "Zuri, go play upstairs. Grandpa is busy." "No," I said, setting the glass down on the counter. It hit the marble with a heavy clink. "If my granddaughter says the dog is crying, I am going to check on the dog. The wine can wait." Whitney's face twitched. "Just one sip." "Garrett, it is tradition." I ignored her and turned to Zuri. Terrence stepped up to the counter, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked parched. "Man, I am thirsty," Terrence said, his voice raspy. He reached out and grabbed the glass I had just set down. "Don't," Whitney said, her voice sharp. "That is for your father. It is just wine, Whit." Terrence laughed nervously. He lifted the glass. "Here is to you, Pop. Thanks for the house." He downed the entire glass in one long swallow before Whitney could move. She froze. She didn't lunge for him. She didn't slap the glass away. She just stood there, her mouth slightly open, her face draining of all color. It wasn't the look of a wife annoyed that her husband stole a drink. It was the look of a woman watching a car crash in slow motion. That was good. Terrence exhaled, placing the empty glass back on the counter. "A bit bitter, though. You sure that didn't turn Pop?" I frowned, looking at the empty glass, then at Whitney. She was staring at Terrence, her chest heaving rapidly. I took Zuri's hand. "Come on, sweetie. Let's go see the dog." I walked out to the patio, but the image of Whitney's face stuck in my mind. She looked like she had seen a ghost. I spent 10 minutes outside with Zuri. The dog, a golden retriever named Buster, was fine. He just wanted someone to throw his ball. I threw it a few times, listening to Zuri giggle, but a knot was tightening in my stomach. Something felt wrong. The air felt too heavy. Then the screaming started. It wasn't a party scream. It was a guttural, terrified shriek that echoed from the living room. Pop-Pop Zuri looked at me scared. "Stay here, Zuri. Stay with Buster." I ran back into the house. The scene that greeted me was chaos. The music had stopped. A circle had formed in the middle of the living room. People were gasping, covering their mouths, backing away. I pushed through the crowd. Terrence was on the floor. My son was thrashing violently, his heels drumming against the hardwood floor I had paid for. His back arched in an unnatural curve, and his eyes were rolled back into his head, showing only the whites. Thick, pinkish foam was bubbling from his lips, spilling down his chin onto his shirt. "Terrence!" I shouted, dropping to my knees beside him. He was convulsing so hard I couldn't hold him still. His skin was burning hot, but he looked pale, almost gray. "Call 911, I roared at the crowd. "Someone call an ambulance now." I looked up, scanning the room for Whitney. She should have been right there. She should have been holding his head. She should have been screaming his name, but she wasn't. Whitney was standing 5 feet away near the kitchen island. She wasn't moving. Her hands were gripped tight around her own wine glass, so tight her knuckles were white. She wasn't looking at Terrence with sorrow. She wasn't crying. She was looking at me. Her eyes were wide, dilated with a mixture of shock and fury. She looked from Terrence's convulsing body to me, and then back to the empty glass on the counter. Whatever was happening to my son, she knew. She knew exactly what was happening. "Help him!" I yelled at her. "Whitney, what is wrong with him?" She blinked, snapping out of her trance. She took a step back, her voice trembling but not with sadness. It's probably just heat stroke. He was working hard. He is fine." Heat stroke. I looked down at my son. He was choking on his own foam. This wasn't heat stroke. This was poison. I turned back to her, and for the first time in my life, I saw the monster hiding beneath the makeup and the designer dress. She didn't call for help because she was calculating. She was doing the math in her head. If Terrence died, she got the house. But the plan had been for me to die. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 myself, my hands shaking with a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. "My son is having a seizure," I barked into the phone. "Possible poisoning. Send everything you have." Terrence let out a strangled gasp and went limp. His breathing stopped. No, I whispered. I started CPR, pressing down on his chest, counting the rhythm, praying to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. "Breathe, son. Breathe." Whitney finally moved. She rushed over, dropping to her knees, and started wailing loudly, a theatrical, high-pitched sob that sounded performative to my ears. "Oh my God, Terrence! Someone save him! It must have been the food. Did he eat something bad?" I pumped his chest, ignoring her lies. I could smell the wine on his breath, the same bitter wine she had practically forced into my hand. The paramedics burst through the door minutes later. They pushed me aside, taking over. They intubated him right there on the living room floor. "Sir, did he take anything?" "Drugs, medication," the paramedic asked me urgently. "He drank a glass of wine," I said, pointing at the counter. "That glass." I looked at the counter. The glass was gone. I whipped my head around. Whitney was standing by the sink, the water running. She was scrubbing a crystal glass with a frantic intensity, washing away every drop, every fingerprint, every trace of residue. "What are you doing?" I shouted, lunging toward her. She flinched, dropping the wet glass. It shattered in the sink. "I was just cleaning up," she stammered, her eyes darting around the room. It was cluttered. I needed to clear the space for the doctors. "You are destroying evidence," I hissed, stepping into her personal space. "You washed the glass he drank from." "You are crazy, Garrett," she shrieked, turning the attention of the guests onto me. "You are in shock. My husband is dying and you are yelling at me about dishes. You are confused." The paramedics were lifting Terrence onto the gurney. He was still unconscious, a machine breathing for him. "We have to go," the paramedic yelled. I looked at Whitney one last time. I saw the relief in her eyes that the glass was clean. She thought she was safe. She thought she had scrubbed away the truth. I turned and followed the stretcher out the door. I didn't say another word to her. I didn't need to. Because as I climbed into the back of that ambulance, watching my son fight for his life, I made a silent vow. She had tried to kill me. She had poisoned my son by mistake. And now she was going to learn that she had made an enemy of the one man who had the time, the money, and the patience to burn her world to the ground. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't call a friend. I didn't call a doctor. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 20 years. "Ross," I said, when the voice answered. "It's Garrett. I need you to meet me at General Hospital and bring a forensic team. We have a crime scene to secure." The war had just begun. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room waiting area hummed with a sound that drilled straight into my skull. It was a sterile white noise that did nothing to drown out the performance taking place in the center of the room. Whitney was putting on the show of a lifetime. She sat on one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed loud enough to wake the dead. But I watched her closely. I stood against the far wall, my arms crossed over my chest, and I watched the way her eyes darted between her fingers, scanning the room to see who was watching. She was not grieving. She was broadcasting. A young doctor in blue scrubs came through the double doors, looking exhausted. He held a clipboard and scanned the room for family. Before he could even call a name, Whitney launched herself out of the chair and grabbed his arm. "Doctor, please tell me he is going to make it," she wailed, her voice pitching up to a frequency that turned heads 3 rows away. "My husband is strong. He has to be okay." It was just a glass of wine. Just one glass. The doctor tried to gently detach her grip from his arm, but she held on tight. "We are doing everything we can, ma'am," he said, his voice calm and practiced. "We are running toxicology screens now to identify exactly what was in his system." "It was the wine," Whitney interrupted him, shouting now so that the nurses at the station could hear her clearly. "It had to be the wine. My father-in-law brought it." She pointed a shaking finger at me across the room. I felt the eyes of the room shift. Strangers looked at me with suspicion. The security guard near the entrance adjusted his belt. I did not move. I did not defend myself. Defend. I let her speak because every word she said was a brick she was using to build her own prison. "He is getting older," she sobbed, turning her attention back to the doctor but keeping her volume high. "He gets confused. He buys things from discount bins, cheap stuff that has been sitting in hot warehouses for years. I told him not to bring it. I told him Terrence has a sensitive stomach, but he insisted. He is just so stubborn and he forgets things." She was painting a masterpiece of lies. In 3 sentences, she had labeled me as senile, incompetent, and cheap. She was planting the narrative right there in the medical record. If Terrence died, it wasn't murder, it was an accidental poisoning caused by a confused old man who didn't know any better. It was brilliant in a sick, twisted way. She wasn't accusing me of malice, she was accusing me of being a burden. I looked at her tear-stained face and I remembered the bottle. It was a vintage Cabernet Sauvignon, a bottle I had bought at an auction 5 years ago. It had been stored in a temperature-controlled cellar until she stole it. It was worth more than her car. It certainly wasn't from a discount bin. But I didn't say that. I didn't scream that she was lying. I knew that if I started shouting now, I would look exactly like the crazy old man she was describing. "Dad," she cried, walking toward me with her arms outstretched like she wanted to hug me. I flinched internally, but I stood my ground. "Why did you bring that bottle?" she asked loud enough for the police officer standing near the intake desk to hear. "Why didn't you check the label?" I know you didn't mean to hurt him, but look what happened. She stopped just inches from me. Up close, I could smell the sweat of her panic beneath her expensive perfume. Her eyes were red, but they were dry. There was no moisture on her lashes. I am sorry, Whitney, I said, my voice low and flat. I must have made a mistake. She blinked, surprised by my admission. She expected me to fight. She expected the angry black man she could point at and call aggressive. But I gave her nothing. I gave her a tired old man who was accepting the blame. See, she gasped, turning back to the doctor. He admits it. He is just confused. He didn't mean it. Please save my husband. The doctor looked at me with a mixture of pity and frustration before turning back to the double doors. We will know more soon, he said, and disappeared. Whitney collapsed back into the chair, covering her face again. But I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. She thought she had won. She thought she had successfully framed me for negligence before the police even opened a file. She thought I was weak. She was wrong. I turned and walked slowly toward the exit. I need some air, I mumbled to no one in particular. Don't go far, Dad, Whitney called out, her voice dripping with fake concern. You shouldn't be wandering off alone. I kept walking until the sliding glass doors hissed shut behind me, cutting off the noise of her performance. The night air was cool and smelled of exhaust fumes and rain. I walked to the far end of the ambulance bay where the shadows were deep and the lights were dim. My hands, which had been steady inside the hospital, began to shake, not from fear, but from a cold, calculated rage that was spreading through my veins like ice water. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the contacts list. I didn't call the police. Not yet. The police would take statements and file reports, and by the time they got a warrant, Whitney would have scrubbed that house clean. I needed someone who operated faster than the law. I needed someone who knew where the bodies were buried because we had dug the holes together 30 years ago. I dialed Ross. He answered on the second ring. His voice was gravel and smoke rough from years of arguing cases that other lawyers were too scared to touch. Garrett, it is late, he said. You better be calling me because you won the lottery or because you need to hide a body. I need you to listen to me, Ross, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. And I need you to listen carefully. Terrence is in the ICU. Poisoning. There was a pause on the other end. The joking tone vanished instantly, replaced by the sharp alertness of a soldier hearing a twig snap in enemy territory. Talk to me. Whitney tried to kill me, I said, staring at the concrete wall in front of me. She handed me a glass of wine. Zuri distracted me. Terrence drank it instead. He went down in 20 minutes. Foam at the mouth. Convulsions. It was methanol Ross. I know the smell. I spent 30 years in chemical engineering. I know what industrial alcohol smells like when it is masked by tannins. Jesus, Ross breathed. Is he alive? Barely. But that is not why I am calling. Whitney washed the glass. She destroyed the evidence right in front of me before the paramedics even loaded him up. She is in there right now, putting on a show telling the doctors I am senile and that I brought bad wine. She is setting me up for manslaughter, Ross. I heard the sound of a chair scraping against a floor and the rustle of fabric. Ross was moving. Where are you? General Hospital. But I don't need you here. I need you at the house. The new house, Ross asked. The one you just bought. Yes. Listen to me, Ross. The deed is still in my safe. I never signed it over. Technically and legally, that house is still mine. It is my property. Whitney is a guest. I could practically hear Ross smiling a cold, predatory smile that terrified opposition counsel. If it is your house, Garrett, then you have the right to secure your property. Exactly, I said. She is going to try to go back there to finish cleaning. She thinks she got the glass, but she doesn't know what else she left behind. I need you to get a private security team over there right now. Lock it down, change the codes, bar the doors. No one goes in or out without my permission. Not even her. Especially not her. I am on it, Ross said, his voice clipping with efficiency. I have a team I use for corporate espionage. Ex-military. They can be there in 20 minutes. What do you want them to look for? Everything I said. Check the trash. Check the drains. Check her bathroom cabinets. If she used methanol, she had to bring it in a container. She wouldn't have thrown it in the kitchen trash. She is too smart for that. But she was panicked. She didn't expect Terrence to drink it. She made a mistake, Ross. I know she did. Find it. Consider it done, Ross said. Garrett, are you safe? I am fine, I said, touching the pocket where I kept my wallet. But Ross, there is something else. What is it? She thinks I am broke, I said. She thinks I am just a retired engineer living on a pension. She has no idea about the patents. She has no idea about the offshore accounts. She thinks she is fighting a helpless old man. Ross let out a short, dark laugh. That is going to be her last mistake. I am going to let her think it, I said. I am going to let her believe she has won. I want her to get comfortable. I want her to think she has me cornered, and when she overplays her hand, I am going to crush her. I will meet you at the hospital after I secure the house, Ross said. Sit tight. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. And for God's sake, don't drink anything she gives you. I hung up the phone and stood there for a moment in the dark. I thought about the days when Ross and I were the only two black men in a boardroom full of people who thought we were there to serve the coffee. I thought about how we had watched each other's backs, how we had built our successes in the shadows while everyone else underestimated us. Whitney had made the classic mistake of the arrogant. She looked at my gray hair and my old clothes and she saw weakness. She didn't see the predator that had survived 40 years in the oil industry. I turned around and walked back toward the sliding doors. I put my mask back on. The shoulders slumped a little. The walk became a little slower, a little more hesitant. I rubbed my eyes to make them look red and weary. I walked back into the waiting room. Whitney was still there holding court with a nurse now spinning her web of lies. She looked up when I entered and her eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second, assessing me, checking for threats. I gave her a sad, confused smile and sat down 3 seats away. "Did you get some air, Dad?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension. "Yes," I said quietly. "I just needed to clear my head." "Good," she said, turning back to the nurse. "As I was saying, he gets very overwhelmed in stressful situations. We have been worried about his memory for months now." I clasped my hands together in my lap and stared at the floor, letting her talk. Let her build her case. Let her stack the lies as high as she wanted. The higher she built it, the harder she would fall when I pulled the foundation out from under her. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Ross. "Team is en route. We own the house." I closed my eyes and let out a long, slow breath. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for the wolf to come home. I left the hospital with the sound of the heart monitor still echoing in my ears, a rhythmic beep that marked the seconds my son had left to live. Ross had already sent his team to the villa, but I needed to be there. I needed to see with my own eyes what she had done to the home I bought for her. The cab ride was a blur of streetlights and rain against the window. When we pulled up the long driveway, the house loomed in the darkness like a mausoleum. It was a beautiful structure, 5 bedrooms of modern architecture nestled in the hills, but tonight it felt cold and lifeless. The security guard Ross had posted at the gate nodded to me as I entered. He told me the house was clear, but I knew better. A house is never truly clear when secrets are buried in the foundation. I unlocked the front door and the smell hit me instantly. It was not the smell of a party. It was not the smell of stale champagne or expensive perfume. It was the sharp chemical sting of bleach mixed with the artificial scent of lemon cleaning spray. It was the smell of a crime scene that had been scrubbed raw. I walked into the kitchen. An hour ago, this room had been filled with caterers and guests and laughter. Now it was terrifyingly sterile. The marble countertops gleamed under the recessed lighting. The stainless steel sink where she had frantically washed the glass was bone dry and polished to a shine. The floor where the paramedics had tracked in mud and grass was spotless. She had not just cleaned up, she had erased time. It was as if the party had never happened, as if Terrence had never collapsed on this floor. My heart hammered against my ribs. She was thorough. She was smarter than I had given her credit for. She knew that the police would eventually come, and she had made sure they would find nothing but a pristine model home. But panic makes people sloppy. Panic makes people rush. I looked around the room trying to think like her. She had broken the glass in the sink. She couldn't put the shards in the kitchen trash can because that was the first place anyone would look. She wouldn't flush them because they would clog the plumbing. She had to get them out of the house. I walked to the back door that led to the garage. The air in the garage was stale and hot. The large recycling bins were lined up against the wall. I opened the first one. Empty. I opened the second one. Empty. She had emptied the indoor bins into the outdoor collection, but surely she hadn't had time to drag the cans down to the curb. I went out the side door into the night. The rain was falling harder now, soaking through my thin jacket. I walked around to the side of the house where the main waste disposal units were kept behind a wooden lattice fence. I lifted the heavy plastic lid of the main trash can. It was full. Black bags were piled high, bursting with the detritus of the party. Paper plates, plastic cups, napkins stained with lipstick. I took a deep breath and did something I never thought I would have to do again. I reached in. I was a man with 2 engineering degrees, a man who held patents that powered cities, and here I was digging through garbage in the rain like a scavenger. It was humiliating, it was degrading, and it fueled the fire in my belly until it burned hotter than any furnace. I tore open the top bag, nothing but food waste and soggy napkins. I moved to the second bag. My hands were covered in grime, my expensive watch scraping against the side of the bin. I sifted through the refuse, my fingers searching for the sharp bite of broken crystal. Then I felt it. Near the bottom of the third bag, wrapped hastily in a wad of paper towels, was a hard, jagged lump. I pulled it out and unwrapped it. There they were, the shards of the crystal wine glass. I could still see the red stain of the vintage Cabernet on the curved fragments. She hadn't washed it well enough before she dropped it. I carefully placed the shards into a plastic bag I had brought from the hospital. But I wasn't done. If she had poisoned him, she needed a delivery method. She couldn't have just carried loose powder or liquid in her pocket. I dug deeper. I ignored the smell of sour food and the rain running down my neck. I sifted through every inch of that bag, and then I found it. It was tiny, so small I almost missed it. A small glass vial no bigger than my thumb. It had no label. It was empty, but when I unscrewed the cap and sniffed it, the odor was faint but unmistakable. It smelled like industrial alcohol, like death. I pocketed the vial, my hand closing around it like a vice. I had her. I had the weapon, and I had the delivery system. I stood up, my knees popping, my back aching. I wiped my hands on my pants, not caring about the stains. I turned to go back inside to wait for Ross, but a shadow detached itself from the side of the house. "You shouldn't be digging in the trash, Garrett. It is beneath you." The voice was cool and smooth like polished stone. I froze. I hadn't heard a car approach. I hadn't heard footsteps. She had appeared like a phantom out of the rain. Whitney stood 10 feet away under the eaves of the house. She was still wearing the white dress, but she had changed her shoes to practical sneakers. She had a raincoat draped over her shoulders. Her face was pale in the moonlight, but her eyes were dark pits that absorbed the light. She wasn't crying anymore. The grieving widow mask was gone, replaced by something much colder and much more dangerous. I straightened up, trying to regain some shred of dignity despite the garbage juice on my hands. I was looking for my keys. I lied, my voice raspy. I thought I dropped them when the paramedics came. She tilted her head slightly, watching me with the curiosity of a scientist observing a lab rat. "You are a terrible liar, Garrett," she said softly. "You were looking for the glass." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. "You are pathetic," she continued, stepping out from the shelter of the eaves and into the rain. "Look at you, a sad, confused old man rooting around in the filth. Do you really think anyone is going to believe you? Do you think the police will listen to a man who can't even remember where he put his keys?" She walked closer until she was just a few feet away. The smell of her expensive perfume mixed with the smell of the trash, creating a nauseating combination. "You poisoned him," I said. I didn't shout it. I stated it as a fact. Her expression didn't change. She didn't flinch. She didn't deny it. Instead, she smiled a small, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You brought the wine, Garrett," she said. "Everyone saw you. Everyone heard me tell the doctor that you buy cheap things, that you get confused. That is the story. That is the truth that will be written in the police report. An accident caused by a negligent father. Why, I asked. Why, Terrence? He loved you." She laughed, a short, sharp sound like breaking glass. "Love doesn't pay the bills, Garrett. Love doesn't pay off $2 million in debt. Love doesn't keep me in the lifestyle I deserve." Terrence was useless. He lost his job 6 months ago. Did you know that? Of course you didn't. He was too afraid of you to tell you. He was weak, just like you. She took another step closer, invading my personal space. She was banking on my physical weakness, on the frailty I had projected for years. "But you," she hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper, "you are the real problem. You were supposed to drink it. It was for you. A new beginning, remember? You were supposed to have a heart attack and die peacefully and leave us this house and your pension. But you had to let him drink it. You killed him, Garrett. You killed your own son because you were too busy playing with the dog." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. She was twisting the knife using my own guilt against me. I wanted to grab her. I wanted to shake the truth out of her. But I knew Ross's security cameras were recording. I knew I had to play the victim. I slumped my shoulders, letting my face crumble. "I didn't mean to," I stammered, my voice trembling. "It was an accident." "It was manslaughter," she corrected me sharply. "And that is exactly what I am going to tell the police. Unless," she let the word hang in the air, heavy with implication. "Unless," what I asked, looking up at her with watery eyes. "Unless you fix this," she said. She reached into her raincoat pocket and pulled out a folded document. It was dry, protected from the rain. "I need you to sign this," she said, holding it out. "What is it?" "It is a power of attorney," she said. "It gives me full control over your assets and Terrence's assets. I need to manage the medical bills. I need to manage the house. You are clearly not capable. Look at you, covered in garbage. You are senile, Garrett. You are a danger to yourself and others." I stared at the paper. This was her play. This was the first card. She was leveraging my freedom against my money. "If you sign this," she said, her voice taking on a soothing, mocking tone, "I won't press charges. I will tell the police it was just a tragic accident. I will keep you out of prison. I will find a nice facility for you where you can rest. Somewhere quiet. But if you don't sign it, I will destroy you. I will sue you for everything you have. I will make sure the whole world knows you poisoned your son with cheap swill because you were too stingy to buy decent wine." She thrust the paper at my chest. "Sign it, Garrett. Do it for Terrence. It is the least you can do after what you did to him." I looked at the paper, then at her face. She looked triumphant. She thought she had checkmated me. She thought I was a scared old man with no options. I reached out with a trembling hand and took the paper. I held it as if it were a lifeline. "I need my glasses," I mumbled. "I can't read it without my glasses." She rolled her eyes, an expression of pure impatience. "You don't need to read it. It is standard. Just sign it." "I can't," I whined, playing up the confusion. "I need to go to my hotel. My glasses are there. I will sign it tomorrow. I promise. Please, Whitney, don't call the police." She studied me for a long moment, weighing her options. She looked at my shaking hands, my dirty clothes, my fear. She saw exactly what she wanted to see. A broken man. "Fine," she spat. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., you meet me at the hospital, and you bring this paper signed. If you are late or if you try to run, I call the district attorney. Do you understand me?" I nodded vigorously. "Yes. Yes, I understand." She snatched the paper back. "Actually, I will keep this. I will bring it to the hospital. You just bring a pen. And Garrett." She leaned in close, her face inches from mine. "If you tell anyone about this conversation, if you try to talk to a lawyer, I will make sure you die in prison." She turned on her heel and walked back toward her car. I watched her go. I stood in the rain, clutching the plastic bag with the glass shards and the vial in my pocket. My heart was racing, but not from fear. It was racing with adrenaline. She had shown her hand. She wanted control. She wanted the money. And she thought she had me terrified. I waited until her taillights disappeared down the driveway. Then I straightened my back. The trembling stopped. The confused expression vanished. I pulled out my phone and dialed Ross. "Did you get that?" I asked. Loud and clear, Ross replied, his voice grim. "The audio from the perimeter mics is perfect. We have her on tape threatening you. We have her admitting she knows Terrence is in debt. And we have her demanding power of attorney under duress." "Good," I said, staring at the empty driveway. "But it is not enough. She thinks I am broke, Ross. She thinks she is stealing pennies from a pensioner. I need her to know what she is really reaching for. I need her to get greedy." "What is the plan?" Ross asked. "She wants power of attorney," I said. "I am going to give it to her. But not the one she thinks. I am going to draft a trap so deep she won't see the bottom until she hits it." I walked back toward the house, my steps heavy and purposeful. The rain washed the garbage juice from my hands, but nothing could wash away the image of her face when she threatened me. She had called me a ghost. She was right. I was the ghost of the man she thought she knew, and I was about to haunt her for the rest of her life. The steady, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only thing that proved my son was still alive. Terrence lay in the hospital bed looking smaller than I had ever seen him. His skin was gray and tubes were snaking out of his mouth and arms like vines trying to drag him back to the earth. I stood by the window watching his chest rise and fall mechanically, waiting for a sign of life that never came. The doctors called it a medically induced coma to manage the swelling in his brain from the toxins. I called it purgatory. I took a step toward the bed, wanting to hold his hand, wanting to apologize for bringing that cursed bottle into his house, even though I knew I wasn't the one who poisoned it. But before I could reach him, the door flew open. "Get out!" Whitney stood in the doorway. She was still wearing the clothes from the party, but she had refreshed her makeup. She looked impeccable. She looked like a grieving wife who was holding it together for the sake of her family, but her eyes were cold, dead things that tracked my every movement. "I am visiting my son Whitney," I said, my voice low. "You are confusing him," she hissed, stepping into the room and blocking my path to the bed. "The doctor said he needs rest. Your presence is stressing everyone out." "Look at you, Garrett. You are shaking. You don't even know what day it is, do you?" I looked at my hands. They were steady. I knew exactly what day it was. It was the day she tried to murder me and missed. But I couldn't say that. Not yet. Not while she held all the cards. "I just want to see Zuri," I said, shifting tactics. "Where is my granddaughter?" Whitney crossed her arms. "Zuri is with my mother, and you are not going to see her. Not until you get a psychological evaluation. I can't trust you around her, Garrett. Not after what you did. You almost killed her father. What if you give her the wrong medicine? What if you leave the stove on? You are a danger to this family." The accusation hit me harder than a physical blow. She was isolating me. She was cutting off my lifeline. Zuri was the only reason I got out of bed some mornings, and Whitney knew it. She was using my granddaughter as a weapon. "You can't keep her from me," I said, fighting to keep the rage out of my voice. "I have rights." "You have nothing," she spat, stepping closer until I could smell the mint she had used to mask the scent of her own fear. "You have a pension that barely covers your rent and a mind that is slipping away. Everyone knows it, Garrett. I have already told the aunts. I told the cousins. They all agree. It is so sad," they said. "Poor Garrett. He just isn't himself anymore." I stared at her, realizing the depths of her campaign. While I was digging through trash in the rain, she had been on the phone. She had been spinning her narrative, cementing her version of the truth before I even had a chance to speak. She was painting me as a senile, incompetent old man who had tragically poisoned his own son out of confusion. It was the perfect cover. If I accused her of murder now, everyone would just say it was my dementia talking. "Please," I said, injecting a tremor into my voice, playing the part she wanted me to play. "I just want to help." "Then go home," she said, pointing to the door. "Go back to your little apartment and stay there. Wait for my call. And Garrett, if you try to come back to the hospital or if you try to go to the house to see Zuri, I will file a restraining order. I will have the security guards drag you out. Do not test me." I looked at Terrence one last time. I promised him silently that I would fix this. Then I turned and walked out of the room. My head hung low, my shoulders slumped. I walked past the nurses' station where I could feel their pitying stares burning into my back. I was the confused old man who hurt his son. That was who they saw. But the moment the elevator doors closed, my posture straightened. The confusion vanished from my eyes. I wasn't going home. I had work to do. I took a cab to a diner on the outskirts of the city, a place with sticky floors and coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. It was the kind of place where no one asked questions and no one looked you in the eye. I slid into a booth in the back corner and waited. 10 minutes later, a man slid into the seat opposite me. Vance hadn't changed much in the 5 years since I last needed him. He was a small man, nondescript, the kind of person you would forget 5 seconds after meeting him. That was what made him the best private investigator in the state. He placed a thick manila envelope on the table between us. "You look like hell," Garrett Vance said, signaling the waitress for coffee. "My son is in a coma, Vance," I said, "and my daughter-in-law is trying to frame me for it." Vance nodded slowly, not surprised. In his line of work, nothing surprised him anymore. I heard, "The rumor mill is working overtime. She is telling anyone who will listen that you have early onset Alzheimer. She is setting the stage for a competency hearing, Garrett. She wants to take control of your assets. Let her try, I said. But I need to know why. I need to know what she is desperate for. A woman doesn't try to kill her father-in-law and poison her husband just because she is mean. She is doing it because she is cornered. Vance tapped the envelope. You are right. She is not just cornered. She is buried. I ran a deep dive on her financials. Not just the credit reports, but the stuff that doesn't show up on a standard background check. I checked the offshore gambling sites, the shadow lenders, the people who break legs instead of sending collection letters. He opened the envelope and slid a stack of papers toward me. Whitney owes $2 million, Garrett. I stared at the number. $2 million. It was a staggering amount for someone who didn't have a job. How, I asked. Gambling mostly, Vance said. Online poker, sports, betting, high-stakes virtual casinos. She has an addiction, Garrett, a bad one. She has been chasing losses for 3 years. She maxed out Terrence's credit cards, then she started taking loans from private lenders, the kind who charge 20% interest a week. She is in deep. They have given her a deadline. End of the month. I looked at the date on my watch. The end of the month was in 4 days. That is why she was rushing, I whispered. That is why she tried to kill me at the party. She couldn't wait. She needed the inheritance immediately. She thought you were going to die, Vance said. She figured Terrence would inherit your estate, she would pay off the sharks, and no one would be the wiser. But when Terrence drank the wine instead, her plan fell apart. Now she has a husband in a coma and a father-in-law who is still breathing. She is desperate, Garrett. And desperate people make mistakes. But here is the thing, Vance continued, pulling another sheet of paper from the stack. She thinks you are broke. She thinks the inheritance is just the house and a meager savings account. She doesn't know about the real money. I looked at the paper. It was a summary of my own assets, a document I hadn't looked at in years. It listed the patents, 30 years of engineering breakthroughs in deep-sea drilling technology, patents that I owned, patents that every major oil company in the world paid royalties to use. Whitney looked at me and saw a man who bought clothes at discount stores and drove a 10-year-old sedan. She saw a black man from a certain generation and assumed I had nothing because I didn't flash it. She didn't know that the technology keeping the lights on in half the city was based on a design I drew on a napkin in 1985. She doesn't know I said, a small, cold smile touching my lips. She thinks she is killing me for pennies. She thinks your net worth is maybe $500,000 tied up in the house, Vance corrected. She has no idea she is declaring war on a man worth 50 times that. If she knew I said, she would have tried harder. She wouldn't have used poison. She would have hired a professional. Vance leaned forward, his voice dropping. She is going to come for you again, Garrett. She has to. The sharks aren't going to wait just because her plan failed. She needs access to money, and she needs it now. If she can get you declared incompetent, she gets power of attorney. She can liquidate your assets to pay her debts while she waits for Terrence to die. She is banning me from the hospital, I said. She is telling everyone I am crazy. Let her, Vance said. It is part of her narrative, but it is also her weakness. She is so focused on painting you as weak that she won't see the blow coming. I picked up the financial report on Whitney. $2 million. It was enough to make anyone desperate. It was enough to turn a greedy woman into a killer. I need you to keep digging, I told Vance. Find out who she owes. Find out names. If she is communicating with them, I want the records. I want to know exactly who is pulling her strings. I can do that, Vance said. But you need to be careful, Garrett. She is going to try to provoke you. She wants you to have an outburst. She wants you to look unstable in public. I won't give her the satisfaction. I said, standing up and tucking the envelope inside my jacket. I am going to be the sweetest, most confused old man she has ever met. I am going to let her lead me right to the edge of the cliff. And then Vance asked, and then I am going to push her off, I said. I left the diner and walked out into the gray afternoon. The city moved around me, loud and chaotic, but my mind was clear. Whitney thought she was playing a game of checkers with a senile old man. She didn't realize she was sitting across the chessboard from a grandmaster. I touched the pocket where I kept the vial I found in the trash. I had the weapon. Now, thanks to Vance, I had the motive. $2 million of motive. I took a deep breath. It was time to go back to the lion's den. It was time to give Whitney exactly what she wanted. A confused, helpless victim ready to be fleeced. I hailed a cab and gave the driver the address of Whitney's rental apartment. It was a dump, a temporary place they had stayed in before I bought them the villa. But she had taken me there ostensibly to care for me. In reality, it was a cell. I was walking back into prison voluntarily, but this time I had the key in my pocket. I stood outside the hospital entrance at exactly 9 in the morning, just as Whitney had demanded. The sky was a bruised purple color, heavy with rain that refused to fall, and the humidity made my joints ache. I wasn't acting that part, but the tremor in my hands, the way my head bobbed slightly as if my neck muscles were giving out, that was all performance art. I had spent 40 years in boardrooms negotiating with sharks who wanted to strip my patents for parts. I knew how to wear a mask. This mask just happened to be made of wrinkles and fear. Whitney pulled up to the curb in her leased SUV. She didn't park. She just idled there, the engine purring, expecting me to come to her like a dog responding to a whistle. I shuffled toward the car, my steps uneven. I let my foot catch on the curb and stumbled, pitching forward. I didn't catch myself with the grace of a man who still played tennis on weekends. I let myself fall hard onto one knee, my palms scraping against the rough concrete. My wallet, which I had held loosely in my hand, skittered across the sidewalk, spilling credit cards and photos into the gutter. "Oh, for God's sake," Whitney groaned from the open window. She didn't get out to help. She just watched me with a look of pure disgust. "Get up, Garrett. You are making a scene." I scrambled to collect my things, my fingers fumbling intentionally. I picked up a photo of Zuri and wiped the grit off it with my sleeve, my hand shaking so violently the image blurred. "I am sorry, Whitney," I stammered, my voice pitching high and thin. "I tripped. My eyes. They aren't what they used to be." The curb came out of nowhere. "Just get in the car," she snapped. I climbed into the passenger seat, moving with agonizing slowness. I watched her grip the steering wheel, her knuckles white. She was running on adrenaline and caffeine, her eyes manic. She looked at me, and I shrank back into the seat, making myself small, making myself look like prey. "Did you bring the paper?" she asked, not even looking at me as she merged aggressively into traffic. I patted my chest pocket. "I have it," I said. "But Whitney, I forgot to sign it." I couldn't find my good pen. The one Terrence gave me. I looked everywhere. I looked in the kitchen. I looked in the bathroom. She slammed her hand against the steering wheel, making me jump. "You are useless, Garrett. Absolutely useless. It is a signature. You could have used a crayon. Now we have to go to the apartment so I can find you a pen. We are wasting time." "I am sorry," I whispered, staring out the window as the city blurred past. "I just wanted it to be right. I didn't want to mess it up." "You mess everything up," she muttered. "You messed up the party. You messed up my husband. And now you are messing up my morning." Inside my chest, my heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm of cold fury. Every insult she threw at me, every look of contempt was fuel. She was revealing herself completely because she thought nobody was watching. She thought she was alone with a broken appliance, not a human being. She didn't know that the broken appliance was recording every word she said on a high-fidelity device sewn into the lining of my jacket. She drove us to the other side of town, away from the hills, away from the villa I had bought her. We pulled up to a dingy apartment complex with peeling paint and overflowed dumpsters. This was where they had lived before I stepped in. This was the reality she was so desperate to escape. We walked up 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken. I wheezed and gasped, holding the railing, my legs burning. Whitney marched ahead, her heels clicking sharply on the concrete, not once looking back to see if I was still breathing. She unlocked the door to apartment 3B and shoved it open. The smell of stale smoke and cat litter hit me instantly, even though they didn't own a cat. The apartment was a disaster. Clothes were piled on the sofa, takeout boxes cluttered the coffee table, and the blinds were drawn tight, shutting out the day. "Sit," she commanded, pointing to a stained armchair in the corner. "Don't touch anything. I need to find a pen and the notary seal." She stormed into the back bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I sat down. I waited exactly 10 seconds to make sure she wasn't coming back out. Then the senile old man vanished. I stood up silently, my movements precise and fluid. I didn't have much time. I reached into the deep pocket of my oversized cardigan and pulled out a small black case. Inside were 4 listening devices no larger than a dime. These weren't the cheap bugs you could buy online. These were prototypes I had engineered myself using piezoelectric technology. They didn't need batteries. They harvested energy from ambient vibrations, from footsteps, from voices, from the hum of the refrigerator. They could transmit for years without maintenance. I moved to the kitchen first. I knew Whitney. She did her business at the kitchen table where she could smoke and drink coffee. I slid one of the devices under the lip of the table, securing it with industrial adhesive. It was invisible unless you were lying on the floor looking up. Next, I moved to the living room. I tucked a second device behind the faceplate of the electrical outlet near the sofa. It would use the house wiring as an antenna, boosting the signal range so Vance could pick it up from a van 3 blocks away. I had 2 left. The bedroom was the prize. That was where she would talk to her lovers or her creditors when she thought she was truly safe. But the door was closed. I couldn't risk opening it. I looked around the hallway. There was a vent above the bedroom door, a return air duct. I dragged a dining chair over, stepping onto it lightly without making a sound. I slipped the third device through the slats of the vent, pushing it deep into the ductwork where the acoustics would carry sound from the bedroom perfectly. I stepped down and replaced the chair just as the bedroom door handle turned. I was back in the armchair, hunched over and trembling before the door opened. Whitney walked out holding a cheap ballpoint pen and a notary stamp she must have stolen from a previous job. She looked at me sitting there exactly where she had left me and sneered. "At least you can follow simple instructions," she said. She cleared a space on the coffee table, sweeping pizza boxes onto the floor with her arm. "Sign," she ordered, throwing the document down. I leaned forward, picking up the pen with a hand that shook like a leaf in a gale. I brought the tip to the paper. I hesitated. "Whitney," I said, my voice quavering, "are you sure this is the right thing to do? Maybe I should talk to a lawyer, just to be safe." Her face contorted with rage. She leaned down, getting right in my face. "You don't need a lawyer, Garrett. You need a caretaker. You almost killed your son. Do you remember that? Do you remember the foam on his lips? That was you. If you don't sign this, I am calling the police right now. I will tell them you confessed. I will tell them you did it on purpose because you were jealous of him." She was bluffing, but it was a good bluff. She was banking on my guilt and my fear. "I am not jealous," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes on command. "I love him." "Then prove it," she hissed. "Give me the authority to save him. I need to pay the doctors, Garrett. I need to pay the mortgage. You can't do it. Look at you. You can barely hold the pen." I looked at the paper. It was a general power of attorney granting her unrestricted access to my bank accounts, my real estate, and my medical decisions. If I signed this, she could empty my accounts by noon and have me committed by dinner. I took a deep breath, letting out a shuddering sigh. I pressed the pen to the paper. I didn't sign my name. I didn't sign Garrett Freeman. I wrote a name that looked similar if you didn't look closely. I wrote Garnet Friedman, a name that didn't exist. A signature that would be legally void the moment a bank teller actually checked my ID. But to Whitney, who was blinded by greed and adrenaline, it looked like victory. I sat back, dropping the pen. "There," I said. "I did it." She snatched the paper up, scanning it hungrily. She didn't even look at the spelling. She just saw ink on the line. Finally, she breathed, a look of pure avarice transforming her face. She tucked the paper into her bra as if it were a wad of cash. Now, she said, her tone shifting instantly from aggression to dismissal. "I have errands to run. I have to go to the bank and then the hospital. You are going to stay here." "Here?" I asked, looking around the squalid room. "But I want to go home. I want to go to my apartment." "No," she said. "You are staying here where I can keep an eye on you. I don't want you wandering off and hurting yourself or talking to anyone." She walked to the front door and opened it. Then she stopped and turned back. "There is food in the fridge," she said. "Don't turn on the stove, and don't answer the door." She stepped out, and I heard the heavy clank of the deadbolt sliding home from the outside. She had locked me in. I waited until I heard her footsteps fade down the stairs. Then I stood up and walked to the window, peering through the dirty blinds. I watched her get into her SUV and speed away, probably racing to the nearest branch of my bank to try and drain my life savings. She was in for a rude awakening. I had already moved the bulk of my liquid assets into trust accounts that required biometric verification. She would walk into that bank with a fake signature and a heart full of greed, and she would walk out with nothing but questions. But that wasn't my concern right now. My concern was the apartment. She had locked me in, but she had forgotten that I was an engineer. Locks were just mechanical puzzles, and I had been solving puzzles since before she was born. I walked to the door and examined the deadbolt. It was a standard double-cylinder, cheap contractor grade. I didn't even need tools. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a thin strip of stiff plastic I had cut from an old loyalty card. I worked it into the jamb, sliding it down until I felt the latch. But I stopped. If I left now, she would know I escaped. She would know I wasn't the helpless old man she thought I was. I needed to stay. I needed to be here when she came back frustrated and angry. I needed to be the sponge that soaked up all her secrets. I turned back to the room. I had work to do. I had planted the bugs, but now I needed to secure my own communications. I went to the bathroom and turned on the shower, letting the water run loud and hard. It was a simple countermeasure creating white noise to mask my voice in case she had hidden cameras I hadn't found yet. I sat on the edge of the tub and pulled out my burner phone. I texted Vance. Package delivered. I am in the nest. She is heading to the bank. Vance replied 10 seconds later. We are listening. Audio is crystal clear. We have a tail on her. I stared at the running water. I was trapped in a filthy apartment held captive by a woman who wanted me dead. I had no food that I trusted to eat, no way to contact my son, and a legal battle looming that could destroy everything I had built. And yet, for the first time since the party, I smiled. Because Whitney didn't know it, but she hadn't locked a prisoner in her apartment. She had locked in a saboteur. I looked at the vents I had rigged and the table I had bugged. Go ahead, Whitney, I whispered to the empty room. Make your moves, call your friends, tell them how you won. I turned off the shower and walked back into the living room, settling into the armchair to wait. I closed my eyes and slowed my breathing, returning to the character of the confused old man. When the key turned in the lock 2 hours later, I was ready. I heard the door slam open. I heard her angry footsteps. She hadn't got the money. Garrett, she screamed, storming into the room. I looked up, blinking sleepily. Is it lunchtime? I asked. She threw her purse at the wall. The bank account is frozen, she yelled. Why is the account frozen? I shrank back, trembling. I don't know, I whined. Maybe I forgot the password. She loomed over me, her face twisted with hate. You better remember it, she hissed, or you are going to rot in this chair until you do. I nodded, tears leaking from my eyes. I will try, I promised. But inside I was laughing. The game had just entered the second quarter and she was already losing. I lay curled on the lumpy sofa, my breathing shallow and rhythmic, mimicking the deep sleep of the exhausted elderly. The apartment was dark, but the streetlights filtered through the grime on the windows, casting long, skeletal shadows across the floor. My eyes were closed, but my ears were straining against the silence. It was 2 a.m. Whitney thought I was sedated. She had mixed a crushed pill into my dinner, a sloppy attempt at chemical restraint that I had spotted the moment she set the plate down. I had pocketed the pill and eaten the mashed potatoes, pretending to drift off an hour later. She was careless. She was arrogant. And tonight that arrogance was going to hand me the smoking gun I needed. A key turned in the lock. It wasn't the heavy click of the deadbolt being thrown from the inside. It was a key entering from the hallway. Whitney had given someone a key. The door creaked open. A heavy boot stepped onto the linoleum. I heard the rustle of a wet raincoat being shed. Did he take it? A male voice whispered. It was a voice I didn't recognize, rough and impatient. He is out cold, Whitney replied, her voice dropping to a husky murmur. I gave him enough Valium to knock out a horse. He won't wake up until noon. Good, the man said. I heard the sound of footsteps crossing the room, passing within inches of the sofa where I lay. I kept my body limp, my mouth slightly open, letting out a soft snore. I felt the air displace as they walked by. I smelled him. He smelled of cheap cologne and engine oil. They went into the bedroom and the door clicked shut, but it didn't latch completely. It didn't matter. I had the bug in the vent. I had the bug under the kitchen table, and I had the receiver in my pocket vibrating softly as it picked up the signal. I waited 5 minutes. 10. I needed them to be comfortable. I needed them to feel safe. When the sounds of their intimacy began distinct and undeniable, a wave of nausea rolled over me. My son was lying in a hospital bed fighting for every breath while his wife was in the next room betraying him with a stranger. It was a violation so profound it made my hands curl into fists under the blanket. But I forced them open. I forced myself to breathe. I wasn't a father right now. I was a surveillance device. I was a witness. The sounds subsided, replaced by the rustle of sheets and the click of a lighter. Smoke drifted under the door. So the bank account is a bust, the man said. His voice was clearer now, amplified by the ductwork I had rigged. It is frozen, Whitney said, sounding petulant. He played dumb, said he forgot the password. But I found his notebook, the one he keeps in his suitcase. I am going to try again tomorrow online. If that doesn't work, I will drag him back to the branch and make him sign a withdrawal slip in blood if I have to." "You don't have time, babe," the man said. "The sharks are circling. You owe $2 million. They want their money by Friday. If you don't pay up, they are going to come for you. And I can't stop them." I know, Whitney snapped. "Why do you think I am doing this? Why do you think I have that old bag of bones sleeping on my couch? He is the golden goose. I just need to wring his neck." I lay there in the dark, the words etching themselves into my memory. Golden goose. Wring his neck. "The methanol didn't work," the man said. "I told you it was a gamble. You should have just used the rat poison. It was too messy," Whitney argued. "The methanol was supposed to look like a stroke or a heart attack. It mimics the symptoms." "You told me that. You said it was untraceable if he drank enough. He didn't drink enough," the man grunted. "And the son drank it instead." "You messed up, Whit." "I didn't mess up," she hissed. "The kid got in the way. And Terrence. Well, Terrence was always greedy. He drank it before I could stop him. But it doesn't matter. He is in a coma. He isn't waking up. The doctor said his brain is swelling. He is a vegetable. Once I get the power of attorney from the old man, I can pull the plug on Terrence. I will say it is what he would have wanted. Mercy killing." I bit down on my tongue so hard I tasted copper. She was talking about killing my son as if she were deciding to throw out an old rug. Pull the plug. Mercy killing. "And the old man," the man asked, "what is the plan for him? You can't keep him here forever. People will start asking questions. Once he signs the papers," Whitney said, her voice cold and flat, "once the money is transferred to my offshore account, he is going to have an accident." "What kind of accident?" "He is old. He is confused. He wanders off. Maybe he wanders into traffic. Maybe he falls down the stairs. Or maybe he just takes too many of his sleeping pills. Who is going to question it? His son is dead. He is grieving. It is a tragedy." "You are cold, babe," the man laughed. "That is why I like you." "I am practical," she said. "I deserve that money. I put up with Terrence for 5 years. I listened to his boring stories about his father. I pretended to care about his stupid career. I earned every cent of that inheritance." "And my cut?" the man asked. "You get your half," she said. $1 million, enough to get you out of debt with the cartel and set us up in Rio, just like we planned." Rio. They were planning to run. They were going to kill us, liquidate my life work, and disappear to a beach in Brazil. "But we need the signature," the man reminded her. "If he doesn't sign tomorrow, we are in trouble. He will sign," she promised. "I will break him. I will starve him if I have to. He is weak. He is already cracking. Did you see him today? He couldn't even hold a pen. He is pathetic." I lay in the dark listening to them discuss my weakness, my pathetic nature. I listened to them divide up the spoils of a war they didn't even know they were losing. They talked for another hour. They refined the plan. They decided that if I didn't sign by noon tomorrow, the man would come back. He would play the role of a heavy. He would threaten to hurt me. If that didn't work, they would overdose me and forge the signature themselves, hoping it would pass inspection. Finally, the light under the bedroom door went out. The voices stopped. The heavy rhythm of sleep filled the apartment. I waited another 30 minutes. Then I moved. I pulled the blanket over my head, creating a small tent of darkness. I took out my phone. The screen glowed softly in the gloom. I opened the recording app. The file was there. 2 hours of audio, crystal clear, every threat, every confession, every detail of the conspiracy to commit double homicide. I pressed the copy button, sending the file to an encrypted cloud server Ross had set up. I watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. 20%, 50%, 90%, upload complete. Then I sent a copy directly to Ross' phone, and another to Vance. I typed a text message to Ross, my fingers flying across the keypad. Plan B is confirmed. They are going to kill me tomorrow if I don't sign. The lover is the supplier. He provided the methanol. They are planning to flee to Brazil. Do not move yet. I need one more thing. I put the phone away and lay back on the sofa. I stared up at the ceiling where water stains created a map of neglect. The disgust I felt was a physical weight, a sludge in my gut. I felt dirty just being in the same zip code as these people. I wanted to scrub my skin raw. I wanted to scream. But beneath the disgust, something else was hardening. It was a cold, sharp resolve. It was the engineer in me taking over. When a machine is broken, you don't get angry at it. You dismantle it. You take it apart piece by piece until it can't function anymore. Whitney and her lover were a broken machine. They were a mechanism of greed and violence, and I was going to dismantle them. I wasn't going to just send them to prison. That was too easy. Prison was a roof and 3 meals a day. Prison was a structure. I wanted them to feel the chaos they had tried to inflict on me. I wanted them to feel the terror of the walls closing in. I rolled over on the narrow sofa, my joints popping. I thought about the man in the bedroom. He had called me a bag of bones. He had laughed about my death. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow, you are going to find out just how heavy a bag of bones can be. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I visualized the chessboard. I moved the pieces in my mind. I saw the trap I had laid, and I saw them walking right into it, smiling and laughing. They wanted a signature. They wanted access to the money. I would give them access. I would open the door wide. And when they stepped through, they would find themselves falling into a pit so deep they would never see the sun again. The sun began to rise, painting the dirty windows with gray light. The sounds of the city waking up drifted in from outside. Sirens, traffic, life. I sat up and rubbed my face. I looked at the bedroom door. "Good morning, Whitney," I whispered. "Today is the first day of the end of your life." I stood up and shuffled toward the kitchen, my gait uneven, my posture stooped. I put the kettle on the stove. I wanted tea, and I wanted to be sitting there waiting for them when they woke up. I wanted them to see the confused old man one last time before the monster ate them whole. The kettle began to whistle, a shrill, piercing sound. Let the games begin. The next morning, the apartment door opened and a small figure stepped into the gloom. It was Zuri. My granddaughter looked smaller than I remembered. Her braids were messy and her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy. She was wearing a mismatched outfit that told me she had dressed herself because no one else cared enough to help her. Whitney walked in behind her, talking on her cell phone, her voice sharp and agitated. "You just sit there and be quiet." Whitney snapped at Zuri, pointing to a corner of the living room where the carpet was stained. "I have to deal with the lawyer. Don't ask me for snacks. Don't ask me for the tablet. Just sit." Zuri nodded silently and sat down on the floor, pulling her knees up to her chest. She looked like a little statue of misery. Whitney ignored her and marched into the kitchen, continuing her argument on the phone about wire transfers and routing numbers. I sat in my armchair, my hands trembling in my lap, maintaining the facade of the confused old man. But my heart was breaking. Zuri was the innocent collateral damage in this war. She had lost her father to a coma and her mother to greed. Now she was trapped in this filth with a grandmother figure who saw her as nothing more than a piece of luggage. I waited until Whitney's voice rose in anger in the kitchen. She was yelling at a bank teller. She was distracted. I made a small sound, a soft whistle, the kind I used to make when we played hide and seek in the backyard of my old house. Zuri's head snapped up. Her big brown eyes locked onto mine. For a second, she looked scared. She had been told I was sick. She had been told I was dangerous. But then she saw me, really saw me. She saw the grandfather who taught her how to tie her shoes and how to mix paints to make the perfect shade of purple. She stood up slowly, checking the kitchen door to make sure her mother wasn't looking. Then she tiptoed across the room. She moved with a stealth that no 6-year-old should have to learn. She stopped right in front of my chair. "Pop, pop," she whispered. I didn't answer with words. I couldn't risk the bugs picking up a coherent sentence. Instead, I slowly reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, hard candy. It was a butterscotch, her favorite. I had kept it there for 3 days, hoping for this moment. I placed it in her small hand and closed her fingers over it. Her lower lip trembled. She looked at the candy and then back at me. The fear in her eyes began to dissolve, replaced by a fierce, childish determination. She reached into the pocket of her jeans. "I have something for you too," she whispered. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was wrinkled and torn at the edges. It was a piece of construction paper from school. She unfolded it carefully, her hands shaking just a little. She held it up for me to see. It was a drawing done in crayon. It was crude, but the message was as clear as a high-definition photograph. There were 3 stick figures. One was lying on the ground with X's for eyes. That was Terrence. One was standing next to him with a big sad face. That was me. And the third figure was tall with yellow hair and a big red mouth. That was Whitney. But it was the detail in the center that stopped my heart. In the drawing, the Whitney figure was holding a purple bottle over a red cup. Black scribbles were coming out of the bottle and going into the cup. and above the cup, Zuri had written one word in block letters. Bad. I stared at the drawing, my breath caught in my throat. I had suspected she saw something. I knew she was the one who tugged my sleeve, but I didn't know she had seen the pour. I didn't know she had processed it. She saw her mother poison the wine. I looked at Zuri. Her eyes were wide, pleading with me to understand. Mommy put the cleaning water in the juice, she whispered. I saw it pop. It was the purple bottle from under the sink. I felt a tear leak from my eye. It wasn't acting this time. It was pure, unadulterated grief. This child was carrying a burden that would crush a grown man. She knew. She knew her mother had hurt her father, and she had been carrying that secret alone, surrounded by lies. I reached out and touched her cheek. My hand was steady for just a second. You are brave, I mouthed. You are so brave. She leaned into my hand, seeking comfort, seeking a protector. For a moment we were just a grandfather and his granddaughter united by a terrible truth. Then the shadow fell over us. What are you doing? Whitney's voice was a whip crack in the small room. Zuri jumped violently, pulling away from me. She tried to hide the drawing behind her back, but she wasn't fast enough. Whitney lunged across the room. She didn't look like a mother. She looked like a predator. She grabbed Zuri's arm and yanked her forward. Zuri screamed a high-pitched sound of terror that cut right through me. Show me what you have, Whitney shrieked. What did you give him? Did you give him food? I told you not to feed him. No, Mommy, Zuri cried, trying to pull away. Whitney pried Zuri's fingers open. The paper fell to the floor, landing face up. The drawing stared up at us. The purple bottle, the red cup, the word bad. The silence that filled the room was absolute. Whitney stared at the drawing. Her face went pale, then red. She understood instantly. She knew exactly what she was looking at. It wasn't just a child's doodle. It was an eyewitness testimony. You little brat, she hissed. She grabbed Zuri by the shoulders and shook her. Her fingers dug into the little girl's arms. Who did you show this to? Whitney screamed, shaking her so hard Zuri's head snapped back and forth. Did you show anyone at school? Did you show the teacher? Tell me right now or I swear to God, Zuri. I didn't. Zuri sobbed, her feet dangling off the floor as Whitney hauled her upward. I just showed Pop. Whitney threw Zuri toward the bedroom. The little girl stumbled and fell, hitting her shoulder against the doorframe. She curled into a ball, covering her head, waiting for a blow. Get in your room, Whitney roared. Get in there and don't you dare come out. If I see you with a crayon again, I will break your fingers. Do you hear me? Zuri scrambled into the bedroom, sobbing hysterically. Whitney slammed the door so hard the walls shook. She stood there for a moment, breathing heavily, her chest heaving. Then she turned to me. Her eyes were wild. She looked at the drawing on the floor, then she looked at me. She snatched the paper up and crumpled it into a tight ball. You like that, old man, she spat, walking toward me. You like turning my daughter against me. I sat in the armchair and every muscle in my body was locked tight. The rage was a physical thing, a hot red tide rising in my throat. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to reach out with my engineer hands and crush her windpipe. I wanted to break her into pieces for touching Zuri. I wanted to roar the truth into her face that I wasn't senile, that I was going to destroy her, that she had just made the biggest mistake of her miserable life. My legs tensed, ready to spring. The mask was slipping. The fury was too great. I couldn't hold it back. But if I moved now, if I broke character now, I lost. If I attacked her, she would call the police. She would have the bruises to prove I was violent. She would get me committed or jailed, and Zuri would be left alone with this monster. I had to stay in the chair. I had to stay the confused old man. But the rage needed to go somewhere. I gripped the armrest of the chair with my left hand. I dug my fingernails into the fabric and then into my own flesh. I pressed down harder. I felt the skin break. I felt the sharp sting of my own nails tearing into my palm. I pushed harder. I focused all my hate, all my violence into that one point of pain. I felt the warm wetness of blood pooling in my hand. I ground my fingers into the wound, using the physical agony to anchor myself to keep me from lunging at her throat. Whitney loomed over me. She slapped me, hard. The blow snapped my head to the side. My lips split. Look at me, she screamed. You think you are clever. You are nothing. You are a vegetable. And that little girl in there, she is mine. She does what I say, and if she doesn't, she learns. Just like you are gonna learn. She slapped me again. Backhand. My glasses flew off my face and skittered across the floor. I sat there blinking up at her, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of pain, tears of helpless rage. I want my mommy, I whimpered, forcing the words out through my bleeding lip. Whitney stared at me with disgust. She saw a broken old man crying for his mother. She didn't see my left hand hidden beside my leg dripping blood onto the carpet. She didn't see the promise of annihilation in my eyes because she was too blinded by her own power. "You are pathetic," she said. She turned and walked into the kitchen. I heard the sound of a lighter. She was burning the drawing. She was destroying the evidence. I sat in the chair, my hand throbbing, my heart beating a slow drum of war. She had hurt Zuri. That was the line. That was the point of no return. Before this, it was about money. It was about the house. It was about Terrence. But now, it was war. Total war. I looked at my hand. The blood was dark and thick. It was a reminder. A contract signed in my own blood. I wasn't just going to put her in prison. I was going to erase her. I waited until I heard her pour a drink in the kitchen. Then I slowly wiped my bloody hand on my pants. I reached into my pocket and touched the recording device. It was still running. It had captured everything. The threats, the violence, the confession about the cleaning fluid. I had the audio. Now I needed the legal kill shot. I closed my eyes and visualized the next step. She was going to bring the lawyer. She was going to try to force the signature. Let her come, I thought. Let her bring her fake lawyer. Let her bring the devil himself. I am ready. The knock on the door came 3 hours later. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a pounding that rattled the cheap frame in the jamb. Whitney opened it, and a man stepped into the apartment. He brought with him the smell of stale cigar smoke and cheap cologne that tried too hard to be expensive. He was wearing a suit that shined under the kitchen lights, a polyester blend that had seen better days. He carried a briefcase that looked like it had been chewed on by a dog. "This is Mr. Salinger," Whitney announced, shutting the door and locking it. "He is here to help you with your paperwork, Garrett." I looked at Mr. Salinger. He didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like a shark that swam in shallow water, eating whatever scraps fell off the pier. His eyes were small and beady, shifting around the room, assessing the value of the television, the laptop on the counter, and finally me. He looked at me with a sneer that told me he made a living preying on the weak. "Mr. Freeman," he said, his voice oily, "I understand you are having some trouble managing your affairs. Your daughter-in-law has asked me to expedite the transfer of assets to ensure your continued care." I sat in the armchair, my hands trembling in my lap. I hunched my shoulders, making myself look smaller. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice wavering. "I have a lawyer. His name is Ross." Whitney stepped forward. "Ross isn't your lawyer anymore, Dad. He retired. Remember, you forget things. Mr. Salinger is the best in the business. He is going to make sure you are taken care of." Salinger sat down at the kitchen table, opening his briefcase. He pulled out a stack of documents thick enough to choke a horse. He laid them out with a flourish. "Just a few signatures, Mr. Freeman," he said, uncapping a gold pen that looked fake. "Standard procedure for a man in your condition." I stood up slowly, my knees popping. I shuffled over to the table. I looked down at the papers. The print was small, dense, and legal, but I didn't need to read it to know what it was. I had read thousands of contracts in my life. I recognized the layout. This wasn't a power of attorney for healthcare. This was a quitclaim deed. This was a total transfer of assets. This was a document that would strip me of every patent, every property, and every dime I had to my name. It listed the house in the hills. It listed my old home. It listed accounts I hadn't even told Whitney about. She had been digging. She had found the account numbers probably from the old files in my home office. "I can't read this," I mumbled, squinting at the page. "The letters are too small. Where are my glasses?" "You lost your glasses," Whitney snapped. "Just sign on the line, Garrett, the one with the X." I reached for the pen, but I let my hand shake violently. The pen rattled against the table. "I can't see the X," I whined. "It is all blurry." "Is this for the nursing home? Are you sending me away?" Salinger sighed, looking at Whitney. "He is pretty far gone, isn't he?" "He is useless," Whitney said. "Just show him where to sign." Salinger grabbed my hand. His palms were damp. He forced the pen into my fingers and guided my hand to the paper. "Right here, old-timer. Just make your mark." I pulled my hand back. "No," I said. "I need to read it. My father always said never sign anything you haven't read." Whitney slammed her hand down on the table. "Read it!" Then she screamed, "Read it fast!" I leaned over the paper, my nose almost touching the page. I moved my head back and forth, pretending to scan the lines. I was actually memorizing the names on the document. There was a shell company listed as the beneficiary. W&D Holdings. Whitney and Damien. Or maybe Whitney and Dave the lover I heard last night. They had already set up a corporate structure to launder my money. They were more organized than I thought. This says, transfer of ownership, I said, looking up at Salinger. Does this mean I don't own my house anymore? It means we are putting it in a trust. Salinger lied smoothly. To protect it from taxes. It is for your benefit, Mr. Freeman. I don't want to, I said, dropping the pen. I want to wait for Terrence. Terrence should sign this. Terrence is dying, Whitney shrieked. Her patience had evaporated hours ago. She was running on panic and greed. Terrence is in a coma because of you. If you don't sign this, we can't pay for his surgery. Do you want him to die? Is that it? Do you want to kill your son all over again? The guilt trip, the classic manipulation. I let my chin tremble. No, I whispered. I want to save him. Then sign the damn paper, she yelled. I picked up the pen again. I hovered over the signature line. I needed to buy more time. I needed to push her just a little further. I needed her so angry that she wouldn't check the details. I need water, I said. My mouth is dry. I can't swallow. Whitney groaned. Get him water, she barked at Salinger. Salinger looked annoyed, but he got up and went to the sink. He filled a dirty glass with tap water and slammed it down in front of me. Drink, he ordered, then sign. I reached for the glass with both hands shaking uncontrollably. I lifted it to my lips. I took a sip, letting water dribble down my chin onto my shirt. Disgusting, Whitney muttered, turning her head away. I lowered the glass, but I didn't set it down. I watched Salinger lean back in his chair, checking his watch. I watched Whitney pacing by the window. Oops, I said. I let the glass slip. It hit the table right on the edge of the stack of documents. Water splashed everywhere, soaking the papers, running across the ink pooling on the floor. Oh my God, Whitney screamed, rushing forward. You idiot, Salinger shouted, snatching the papers up, trying to shake them dry. I stood there, my hands held up in surrender water dripping from my fingers. I am sorry, I wailed. It slipped. My hands are wet. Whitney looked at the soggy documents. The ink was running on the top page, but the signature line was still legible. It was a mess, but it was a salvageable mess. It is fine, she hissed, her eyes wide and manic. It is fine. The signature page is dry enough. Sign it now, Garrett. Right now before I lose my mind. She grabbed a napkin and furiously wiped the table. She shoved the damp paper back in front of me. Salinger produced another pen from his jacket. This one was a cheap plastic stick. Use this one, he growled. And don't drop it. I took the pen. I looked at Whitney. I looked at the paper. I don't know, I said, backing away a step. Maybe this is a sign. Maybe I shouldn't sign. God doesn't want me to sign, Whitney snapped. The sound was guttural, a noise of pure primal frustration. She lunged across the table. Her hand connected with my face with a force that rocked me back on my heels. It was the second time she had hit me in 2 days. The sting was sharp and hot. My cheek burned. Sign the paper, she screamed, her face inches from mine, spittle flying from her lips. Sign it, or I swear to God, Garrett, I will take you to the basement and leave you there in the dark. I will let you rot. Do you hear me? I will let the rats eat you. I looked at her. I saw the veins bulging in her neck. I saw the madness in her eyes. She had crossed the line from greedy to homicidal. She was ready to kill me right here, right now. I cowered, raising my arms to protect my face. Okay, I sobbed. Okay, I will sign. Please don't hurt me. Do it, she breathed, pointing at the line. I leaned over the table. I sniffled, wiping my nose with my sleeve. I gripped the pen like a child learning to write. I pressed the tip to the paper. I didn't write Garrett Freeman. I didn't write Garnet Friedman. I wrote Otis Jenkins. Otis was a mutt I had rescued from a shelter 20 years ago. He was a good dog, loyal and brave. He had died 5 years ago of old age. His name was the only thing I could think of that represented loyalty in a room full of traitors. I wrote it in a shaky scrawl, the letters jagged and uneven. O-T-I-S-J-A-N-K-I-N. From upside down and through the haze of her rage, it looked like a signature. It looked like a mess of lines that could be interpreted as a name by someone who desperately wanted to see it. "There," I whispered, dropping the pen. I did it. Whitney snatched the paper from under my hand. She didn't read it. She didn't check the spelling. She didn't look at the letters. She just saw ink on the line. She saw the key to the vault. Finally, she exhaled, clutching the damp document to her chest. Finally. She turned to Salinger, her face transformed by triumph. "We have it. File it, immediately." Salinger took the paper, stuffing it into his briefcase without a second glance. He was just the hired gun. He didn't care if the signature was valid, he just wanted his fee. "I will have this recorded within the hour," he said, snapping the case shut. "You are a rich woman, Whitney." Whitney looked at me. She smiled a cold, victorious smile that sent ice through my veins. "You did a good thing, Dad," she said, her voice mocking. "You finally made yourself useful." I stood there, rubbing my stinging cheek, my eyes downcast. I let my shoulders slump. I let out a ragged sigh of defeat. "Can I go to sleep now?" I asked, my voice small. "I am tired." "Go ahead," Whitney said, waving her hand dismissively. "Go sleep. Sleep forever for all I care." Salinger left the door, clicking shut behind him. Whitney went into the kitchen, presumably to call her lover and celebrate. I walked slowly back to the armchair. I sat down and closed my eyes. Inside my chest, a laugh was building. It was a dark, dangerous laugh. She was running to the bank with a piece of paper signed by a dead dog. She was about to walk into a federal building and try to transfer millions of dollars using a forged document witnessed by a disbarred lawyer and signed with a joke. She thought she had won. She thought she had stripped me of everything. But all she had done was sign her own confession. I listened to her in the kitchen, popping the cork on a bottle of wine. She was toasting her victory. "Enjoy it, Whitney," I thought. "Drink up, because the hangover is going to be lethal." I touched the recording device in my pocket. It was all there. The threats, the slap, the coercion, the fraud. I had given her the rope. Now all I had to do was wait for her to hang herself. And she was already climbing the steps to the gallows. I sat in the armchair and watched the dust motes dance in the shaft of sunlight that cut through the grime of the window. The apartment was silent now that the storm had passed, but the air still vibrated with the energy of what I had just done. Whitney was gone. She had marched out the door with her head held high, clutching that damp piece of paper like it was the Holy Grail. She was driving to the bank right now, speeding toward her own destruction, and she didn't even know it. I closed my eyes and pictured it. I knew exactly which branch she would go to. It would be the main branch downtown, the one with the marble floors and the vaulted ceilings. It was the only branch that handled the kind of high-value transfers she was attempting. She would walk in there wearing her expensive shoes and her entitlement like a suit of armor. She would demand to see a manager. She would slam that paper down on the mahogany desk and demand access to the vault. And then the manager would look at the signature. I let out a low chuckle that rattled in my chest. Otis Jenkins, my dead dog. I wondered how long it would take them to notice. I wondered if the teller would squint at the jagged scrawl and ask her who Mr. Jenkins was. I wondered if Whitney would try to argue that Otis was my middle name. The phone rang. It was lying on the table next to me, vibrating against the wood. I looked at the caller ID. It was Whitney. I let it ring 3 times. I needed her to be boiling over. I needed her panic to be at a fever pitch. On the 4th ring, I picked it up. "Hello," I answered, my voice trembling and weak. "You senile old fool," she screamed. The sound was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. She wasn't just angry, she was hysterical. Her voice was shredding itself in her throat. "Whitney," I asked, playing the confused part. "What is wrong? Did you get the money? You humiliated me," she shrieked. "You made me look like an idiot." I walked in there, Garrett. I walked right up to the vice president. I handed him the paper. I told him I had full power of attorney. "And do you know what he did? Do you know what he did to me?" I smiled at the ceiling. "No, Whitney. Tell me." He laughed at me. He actually laughed. He looked at the paper and then he called security. He asked me if this was a prank. He asked me who Otis Jenkins was. I bit my lip to keep from laughing out loud. "Oh dear," I said. "That sounds terrible." It was mortifying, she yelled. There were people watching Garrett, important people. And there I was being escorted away from the desk by a security guard because my father-in-law signed a legal document with a fake name. "Why did you do that? Why did you write that? I gripped the phone tighter. I didn't write a fake name, I said, my voice full of innocent confusion. I signed it. Just like you told me. You were rushing me, Whitney. You were yelling. My hand was shaking. I just wrote what came into my head. You wrote a dog's name, she screamed. I remember that name. That was the mutt you had in the old house. You signed a multi-million-dollar transfer with the name of a dead dog. Are you crazy or are you just stupid? Both, I thought. To you, I am both. I am sorry, I whined. I got confused. The names all mixed together in my head sometimes. I miss Otis. He was a good boy. Shut up about the dog, she roared. You ruined everything. They flagged the account Garrett. They said the document was fraudulent. They said they were going to freeze everything until the account holder came in personally to verify his identity. Do you know what that means? It means I can't get a dime. It means the sharks are going to be at my door tomorrow morning. This was the moment. The desperation was setting in. She was cornered. She had tried the easy way and failed. She had tried the hard way and failed. Now she was out of options. She was breathing hard on the other end of the line, hyperventilating. I could hear the traffic noise in the background. She was sitting in her car, probably pounding the steering wheel. Whitney, I said softly, injecting a note of helpfulness into my voice. Maybe it is just a misunderstanding. Mr. Henderson knows me. He knows I get confused. Mr. Henderson is the one who called security, she spat. Yes, but he is a reasonable man, I said. If I talk to him, if I explain that I made a mistake, maybe he will fix it. There was a silence on the line. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. She was calculating the risk. Taking me out in public was dangerous. I might make a scene. I might talk to someone I shouldn't, but she had no choice. She needed my physical presence to unlock the account. She needed the living, breathing Garrett Freeman to stand in front of the banker and say, yes, give her everything. You think you can fix this? She asked, her voice suspicious but hopeful. I think so, I said. I just need to sign it again, with the right name this time. I won't make a mistake, Whitney. I promise. I don't want Terrence to suffer. She let out a frustrated growl. Fine. Stay there. Don't move. I'm coming back to get you. And Garrett, if you pull another stunt like this, if you write so much as a squiggle that isn't your legal name, I will drive us both off a bridge. Do you understand me? Yes, I said. I understand. She hung up. I put the phone down and stood up. My knees didn't pop this time. My back was straight. The game was entering the endgame. She was coming back to get me. She was going to take me out of this prison and drive me straight to the place where I had the most power. She thought the bank was her salvation. She thought she could bully me into signing the right name in front of a notary. She didn't know that Mr. Henderson wasn't just a banker. He was a man I had played golf with for 20 years. He was a man who had received a frantic call from Ross yesterday morning instructing him to flag any activity on my accounts as potential fraud. Whitney wasn't driving me to the bank to get money. She was driving me to the bank to deliver me to my army. I walked to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. The bruise on my cheek from her slap was darkening, turning a sickly purple. My lip was swollen. I looked battered. I looked abused. Good, I whispered to my reflection. Let the world see. I went back to the living room and found my shoes. I put them on slowly, tying the laces with deliberate care. I smoothed down my cardigan. I checked my pocket to make sure the recording device was still there. It was humming warm against my leg. I sat back down in the armchair and waited. 10 minutes later, I heard the tires screech in the parking lot below. She was driving like a maniac. She was in a rush to get her hands on the money before the sun went down. She pounded up the stairs. The key rattled in the lock. The door flew open. Whitney stood there, her hair wild, her eyes manic. She looked like a woman on the edge of a breakdown. Get up, she ordered. We are going. I stood up, shuffling my feet. I am ready, I said meekly. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into the bruise she had left earlier. Walk faster, she hissed, dragging me toward the door. We have 20 minutes before they close the lobby. I stumbled after her, letting her pull me down the stairs. I was leaving the apartment. I was leaving the bugs and the filth and the smell of betrayal. I was walking out into the fresh air. She shoved me into the passenger seat of her SUV. She didn't bother with the seatbelt. She slammed the door and ran around to the driver's side. She gunned the engine and peeled out of the parking lot, cutting off a delivery truck. Don't speak, she said, staring straight ahead. Don't look at anyone. When we get there, you keep your mouth shut until I tell you to sign. I nodded, staring out the window. The city rolled by. We passed a park where children were playing. We passed a coffee shop where people were laughing. Normal life was happening all around us, but inside this car, the air was toxic with greed. We are almost there, I said quietly. Shut up, she snapped. I saw the bank in the distance. It was a fortress of stone and glass. It looked solid. It looked safe. Whitney swerved into the parking lot, taking up 2 spaces. She killed the engine and turned to me. "Listen to me, old man," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "This is your last chance. You go in there. You tell Mr. Henderson you are sorry. You tell him you are having a good day and you want to transfer the funds. You sign your name. Garrett Freeman. Not Otis. Not Mickey Mouse. Garrett Freeman." I looked at her. I looked deep into her eyes. I wanted to remember this moment. I wanted to remember the way she looked at me with total contempt. "I will do what needs to be done," I said. "Good," she said. She got out and came around to my side. She yanked the door open and pulled me out. She gripped my elbow, steering me toward the revolving doors. I walked with my head down, my shoulders hunched. I let her guide me. I let her think she was in control. We pushed through the doors and into the cool, air-conditioned lobby. The smell of money and floor wax hit me. It was a familiar smell, a comforting smell. Whitney marched me straight to the reception desk. "We need to see Mr. Henderson," she demanded. "Immediately." The receptionist looked up. She saw the wild-eyed woman. She saw the battered old man. Her eyes widened. "Mr. Henderson is in a meeting," she said. "Get him out." Whitney slammed her hand on the desk. "Tell him Garrett Freeman is here. Tell him we are here to fix the mistake." The receptionist looked at me. "Mr. Freeman," she asked, her voice softening. "Is that you?" "Yes," I whispered. "It is me." I saw recognition dawn on her face. She knew who I was, and she knew something was wrong. "One moment, please," she said, picking up the phone. Whitney tapped her foot impatiently. She looked around the lobby, glaring at the security guard. She was vibrating with tension. I stood beside her, silent and still. I was the eye of the storm. The door to the back offices opened. Mr. Henderson walked out. He was a tall man with silver hair and a suit that cost more than Whitney's car. He saw me, and his face went hard. He didn't look at Whitney. He looked straight at me. "Garrett," he said, walking toward us. Whitney stepped in front of me, blocking his view. "Mr. Henderson," she said, putting on her fake smile. "I am so sorry about earlier. My father-in-law is having a better moment now. He is ready to sign the papers. We just need to clear up the confusion about the signature." Mr. Henderson stopped. He looked at Whitney with a cold, professional disdain. "There is no confusion, Mrs. Freeman," he said. Whitney faltered. "What do you mean?" "He signed the wrong name. He is confused. But he is here now. He can verify his identity." Mr. Henderson looked over her shoulder at me. His eyes asked a question. "Are you ready?" I stepped out from behind Whitney. I straightened my back. I lifted my chin. The tremor in my hands vanished. The confused look in my eyes was replaced by the steel gaze of the man who had built an empire from nothing. "Hello, Arthur," I said, my voice strong and clear. Whitney spun around. She looked at me. She saw the change. Her mouth dropped open. "I am not confused," I said, looking at Mr. Henderson. "And I am definitely not signing anything for her." Whitney made a noise, a strangled gasp. "Garrett, what are you doing?" "I am finishing this," I said. I turned to Mr. Henderson. "Arthur, execute Protocol 0, lock the accounts, flag all assets, and call the police. This woman is trying to rob me." Whitney lunged. She didn't think. She didn't calculate. She just reacted with pure animal rage. She reached for my throat, her nails aiming for my eyes. "You lying bastard!" she screamed. But before she could touch me, 2 security guards were on her. They had been waiting. They grabbed her arms and pulled her back. "Let me go!" she shrieked, kicking and thrashing. "He is senile. He doesn't know what he is saying. He belongs in a home." I stepped closer to her. I stood just out of range of her kicking feet. I looked her in the eye. "I am not senile. Whitney," I said, my voice low and deadly, "and I am not broke. I am worth $50 million, and you aren't going to see a single cent of it." Her eyes went wide. The fight went out of her for a second, replaced by shock. $50 million. "But you wear old clothes," she stammered. "You drive a junk car." I leaned in. "It is called camouflage, Whitney. You should have looked closer." The security guards began to drag her toward the door. "No," she screamed, struggling again. "No, you can't do this. I have power of attorney. I have his signature. You have a piece of paper signed by a dead dog I called after her. Good luck cashing that in hell." Mr. Henderson put a hand on my shoulder. "Are you all right, Garrett?" I watched them drag her out the revolving doors. I watched her screaming at the sky. "I am fine, Arthur," I said, adjusting my cardigan. "I am just fine. Now let's go to your office. We have a lot of paperwork to do." And Arthur, "Yes, Garrett. Do you have any coffee?" I have had a very long week. I left the bank with the adrenaline fading and a cold, hard dread taking its place. Whitney was screaming in the parking lot, dealing with the police, but I knew she was like a cockroach. She would survive. She would find a way to wriggle out of it. She would call a lawyer or charm a cop or lie her way into bail. I had won the battle for the money, but the war for my son was still being fought in a sterile room across town. I told Arthur Henderson to lock everything down, and then I ran. I didn't run like an old man. I moved with the urgency of a father who knew his child was in the grip of a monster. I hailed a cab outside the bank, my hands shaking not from fear anymore, but from the need to get to Terrence before she did. If she got to him first, if she spun her web of lies while he was weak and confused, she could turn him against me forever. The ride to the hospital felt like it took a lifetime. I stared out the window, watching the city blur past, praying that he was awake, praying that the poison hadn't taken his mind along with his health. When I arrived, Ross was waiting for me in the lobby. He looked grim. "He is awake," Garrett Ross said, falling into step beside me as we walked toward the elevators. "But there is a problem." "What kind of problem?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "The doctors say the methanol damaged his optic nerves," Ross said quietly. "He can't see Garrett. They don't know if it is permanent." I stopped dead in the middle of the hallway. Blind. My son was blind because his wife wanted a payout. The rage that had fueled me all week flared up hot and bright, but I pushed it down. I couldn't be angry now. I had to be strong. "Does he know?" I asked. "He knows he can't see," Ross said. "He is panicked. He is asking for Whitney. He thinks you did this, Garrett. The last thing he remembers is her telling him you bought cheap wine." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Get me in there, Ross. Keep the nurses away. I need 10 minutes alone with him." Ross flashed his badge at the security guard posted outside the ICU. The guard stepped aside. I walked to the door of room 304. I took a deep breath, composing my face even though I knew he couldn't see me. I needed my voice to be steady. I needed to be the anchor in his storm. I opened the door and slipped inside, closing it softly behind me. The room was dark, the blinds drawn against the afternoon sun. The only light came from the monitors glowing green and red. Terrence was sitting up in bed, his hands clawing at the sheets. His eyes were open, but they were staring at nothing, fixed on a point on the wall that didn't exist. He looked terrified. He looked like a little boy who had woken up in a nightmare. "Whitney," he rasped, his voice dry and cracked. "Is that you? Where are you, Whit? I can't see anything. Why is it so dark?" I walked to the side of the bed. I reached out and covered his hand with mine. His skin was cold and clammy. "It is me, son," I said softly. "It is Dad." Terrence ripped his hand away as if I had burned him. He scrambled back against the pillows, his unseeing eyes wide with panic. "Get away from me," he shouted, his voice weak but filled with fear. "Whitney told me. She told me what you did. You poisoned me. You gave me that wine. Why, Dad? Why would you do that?" I stood there letting his accusations wash over me. It hurt. It hurt more than the slap Whitney had given me. It hurt more than the years of silence between us. My own son thought I was a monster because the woman he loved had painted me as one. "I didn't do it, Terrence," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I would never hurt you, you know that. Think, son. Think about who I am." "She said, you are sick," he sobbed, tears leaking from his sightless eyes. "She said you are confused, that you bought bad wine because you didn't know any better. She said you were jealous of us, of the house." "I didn't buy the wine, Terrence," I said, stepping closer. "I brought a bottle from my cellar, a vintage bottle, the one we were saving for your promotion. Do you remember that bottle?" He shook his head, confused. "I don't know. I just remember the taste. It was sweet but bitter. And then the fire." I pulled a chair over and sat down beside him. I didn't try to touch him again. I just sat close enough that he could hear my breathing, close enough that he knew he wasn't alone in the dark. "I am going to tell you the truth, Terrence," I said, "and it is going to be the hardest thing you have ever heard. But I need you to listen. I need you to trust me for just 5 minutes. Can you do that? Can you trust your father for 5 minutes?" He breathed heavily, his chest heaving. "Where is Whitney?" he asked. "Why isn't she here?" "She is at the bank," I said. "She is trying to steal my money, Terrence. She is trying to steal everything I have. And she tried to kill us both to get it." "Liar," he spat. "She loves me. She is my wife. She is a gambler." "Terrence," I said, my voice hardening, "she owes $2 million to loan sharks. She has been stealing from you for years. Why do you think you are in debt? Why do you think you lost the house you lived in before?" He froze. "I never told you about the debt," he whispered. "You didn't have to," I said. "I know everything, son. I know about the credit cards. I know about the loans. I know she lost your job for you because she kept calling your boss demanding advances." He slumped back against the pillows, the fight draining out of him. He looked small and broken. "I didn't want you to know," he whispered. "I wanted you to be proud of me." "I am proud of you," I said. "But you married a predator son. And I have proof." "Proof?" he asked, turning his head toward the sound of my voice. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I connected it to the Bluetooth speaker on the bedside table. "I recorded this last night, Terrence," I said. "I was in her apartment. She thought I was asleep. She was talking to her lover." "Lover," Terrence breathed the word like a curse. "Just listen," I said. I pressed play. The sound of the audio filled the hospital room. It was crystal clear, the sound of a door opening, the heavy footsteps of the man, the intimate rustling of sheets, and then Whitney's voice, cold, calculating, laughing. "He didn't drink enough," she said on the recording, and the son drank it instead. "You messed up, Whit." "I didn't mess up," she hissed from the speaker. "The kid got in the way. And Terrence, well, Terrence was always greedy. He drank it before I could stop him. But it doesn't matter. He is in a coma. He isn't waking up. The doctor said his brain is swelling. He is a vegetable. Once I get the power of attorney from the old man, I can pull the plug on Terrence. I will say it is what he would have wanted. Mercy killing." I watched Terrence's face as he listened. At first there was confusion, then disbelief. He shook his head slowly back and forth as if trying to shake the words out of his ears. "No," he whispered. "No, that is not her. That is not Whitney." The recording continued. "And the old man," the lover asked. "Once he signs the papers, Whitney said he is going to have an accident. Maybe he wanders into traffic. Who is going to question it? His son is dead." Terrence let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a low, keening wail of pure agony. He covered his ears with his hands, trying to block out the voice of the woman he had slept beside for 5 years. The woman he had defended against me. The woman he had nearly died for. "Stop it," he screamed. "Turn it off. Please, Dad, turn it off." I paused the recording. The silence that rushed back into the room was heavy and suffocating. Terrence sat there shaking violently, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat on his skin. He looked shattered. The physical blindness was nothing compared to the emotional darkness he had just been plunged into. "She called me a vegetable," he whispered. "She said she wanted to pull the plug. She wanted the money, son," I said gently. "That is all she ever wanted. She didn't care about you. She didn't care about me. She didn't even care about Zuri." "Zuri?" Terrence gasped, sitting up straight. "Where is Zuri? Is she with her?" "Zuri is safe." I lied. I couldn't tell him about the abuse. Not yet. It would kill him. "She is safe. But we need to make sure she stays safe." He turned his face toward me, his blind eyes searching for mine. "I defended her," he said, his voice hollow. "When you looked at her with suspicion, I defended her. I told you that you were judgmental. I told you that you were old-fashioned. I pushed you away, Dad. I pushed you away for her." I reached out and took his hand again. This time he didn't pull away. He gripped my fingers tight, holding on like he was drowning. "It is okay, son," I said. "Love makes us blind sometimes. You didn't know." "I should have known," he cried. "The debts, the secrets, the way she looked at you when she thought no one was watching. I saw it, Dad. I saw it, and I ignored it because I didn't want to be alone. I was so afraid of being alone." "You are not alone," I said, squeezing his hand. "I am here. I am right here." He broke down then. He sobbed into his hands, his body shaking with the force of his grief. He mourned the wife he thought he had. He mourned the life he thought he was building. He mourned the time he had wasted defending a monster. I sat there and let him cry. I didn't offer platitudes. I didn't tell him it would be okay. It wouldn't be okay. His heart was broken, his body was damaged, and his wife was a criminal. But he was alive, and he was mine again. After a long time, he quieted. He wiped his face with the sheet. He looked older. The boyishness was gone, replaced by a hard, bitter set to his jaw. "Where is she now?" he asked, his voice cold. "She tried to rob the bank," I said. "The police are looking for her. But she is slippery, Terrence. She might try to come here. She might try to finish what she started." "Let her come," he said. I looked at him, surprised by the steel in his voice. "Let her come," he repeated. "I want to hear her lie to me one more time. I want to hear her tell me she loves me while she holds the plug in her hand. And then I want to tell her to go to hell." I squeezed his hand. "We are going to do better than that, son. We are going to make sure she never hurts anyone ever again." I stood up. "I need to go, Terrence. I have to finish this. I have to make sure she goes to prison for a long time." "Don't leave me," he whispered, the fear creeping back in. "I am not leaving you," I said. "Ross has security outside the door. 2 off-duty police officers. No one gets in here without my say-so. You are safe." He nodded, sinking back into the pillows. "Dad," he said. "Yes, son. I am sorry. For everything." I touched his forehead, smoothing back his hair. "Don't be sorry, Terrence. Just get better. We have a lot of work to do." I walked to the door. I looked back at him one last time. He looked broken, but he also looked awake. The poison had taken his sight, but the truth had given him vision. I left the room and nodded to the guards outside. They were big men, serious men. They wouldn't let Whitney within a mile of him. I walked down the hallway, my phone in my hand. It was time for the final act. Whitney was out there desperate and cornered. She thought I was at the bank. She thought Terrence was in a coma. She thought she still had a chance. I was about to take that chance and crush it into dust. I dialed Whitney's number. It was time to invite her to a party she would never forget. I sat in the sterile hallway of the hospital, holding the phone like a grenade that had already had the pin pulled. The voice on the other end was screeching so loud I had to hold the receiver away from my ear. Whitney was unraveling. She had been humiliated at the bank, escorted out by security like a common criminal, and now she was looking for someone to bleed. "Whitney, please," I said, my voice cracking perfectly into a sob. "Please stop screaming. I can't take it anymore. I am at the hospital. I saw Terrence." That stopped her. The screeching halted, replaced by a heavy, predatory silence. "Is he dead?" she asked. There was no fear in her voice, only a dark, hopeful anticipation. "He is blind," I said, letting the tears I had been holding back flood my voice. "The doctor says the damage to his optic nerves is permanent. He will never see again, Whitney. And it is my fault. You were right. I must have bought the wrong wine. I am just a confused old man who hurt his family. I am losing my mind, just like you said." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end, steadying herself, recalculating the odds. "You admit it," she said, her voice dropping to a smooth, satisfied purr. "You admit you are incompetent." "I admit it." I wept. "I am scared. Whitney." The police were at the bank. Mr. Henderson was yelling at me. "I don't understand what is happening anymore. I just want to make it right. I want to ensure Terrence is taken care of. I can't do it. I am too old and too broken." "So what do you want?" she asked, her tone suspicious but undeniably greedy. "I want to sign," I said. "I want to sign everything over to you, the house, the accounts, the patents you found in my office, all of it. I want you to be the guardian. You are the only one strong enough to handle this mess." I could feel her smiling through the phone. It was the smile of a wolf watching a lamb limp away from the flock. "It was about time you realized that, Garrett. But I can't go back to the bank," I said quickly before she could suggest it. "They scared me, Whitney. And I don't want to go to that dirty apartment of yours. I want to do it at the villa. Tonight." "The villa?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I have invited my old partners, the men from the oil company, and a notary. I want them to witness it. I want everyone to know that I am stepping down and you are taking over. I want it to be official so no one can question it later. I want to give you the keys to the kingdom in front of an audience. The ego." That was her fatal flaw. She didn't just want the money, she wanted the glory. She wanted to be seen as the matriarch, the savior, the power behind the throne. The idea of an audience of rich, powerful men watching her ascend was irresistible. It was the narcotic she couldn't say no to. "Fine," she said. "Tonight, 7:00. But if you try anything, Garrett, if you pull another stunt like the dog signature, I will make sure Terrence suffers in the dark for the rest of his life. Do you understand?" "I understand," I whispered. "Please just come. Be beautiful." "It is a big night." I hung up the phone. My hand was steady. My eyes were dry. I looked at Ross, who was standing next to me, his arms crossed, his face grim. "She took the bait," I said. Ross nodded. "The team is setting up the AV equipment at the villa now. We have screens hidden in every room. We have speakers in the garden. There won't be a single corner of that house where she can hide from the truth." "Good," I said. "Make sure the guests are there." I called in every favor I have owed for 40 years, senators, judges, the CEO of the energy conglomerate. I told them I was announcing a major philanthropic initiative. They will be there. "And Whitney thinks they are there to watch her coronation?" Ross asked. "Exactly," I said. "She thinks she is the queen. Let's give her a royal welcome." Vance sent me the updates in real time. He had a tail on her the moment she left the police station, where she had talked her way out of the bank incident by claiming it was a domestic dispute caused by a senile father-in-law. She didn't go home to shower. She didn't go to the hospital to comfort her blind husband. She went shopping. She was broke, technically. Her credit cards were maxed out or frozen by the bank. She owed $2 million to violent men who were likely counting down the hours. But Whitney operated on the logic of the desperate. She needed to look the part to get the part. She believed that tonight was the payout. Tonight she would get access to millions. So spending money she didn't have was just an investment in her future. Vance tracked her to a payday lender in a strip mall on the south side. It was a place with bulletproof glass and interest rates that should be illegal. She walked in wearing her soiled party dress, clutching her diamond engagement ring, the one Terrence had worked 2 jobs to buy her. She walked out 20 minutes later without the ring, but with a thick envelope of cash. She sold her marriage for a dress, I thought, looking at the photos Vance texted me. She went to a high-end boutique downtown, not a discount store, a place where they serve champagne while you try on clothes. She spent $3,000 cash on a dress. It wasn't black. A grieving wife would wear black. A humble daughter-in-law accepting a burden would wear navy or gray. Whitney bought red. It was a blood-red gown, silk and tight cut, low in the front and back. It was a dress that screamed power. It was a dress that said, "I won." She bought matching shoes with heels sharp enough to puncture a lung. She bought a gold necklace that cost more than my first car. She is treating this like the Oscars, Vance texted me. She is delusional. She went to a salon next. She spent 4 hours getting her hair dyed and styled, her nails painted a matching blood red, her makeup done to perfection. She was preparing for her close-up. She wanted to look perfect when she signed the papers that would steal my life. Vance sent me audio from the bug in her car. She was rehearsing her speech. She was driving through traffic, talking to herself in the rearview mirror, practicing the lies she would tell my friends and colleagues. "Thank you, everyone," she said to the empty car, her voice dripping with fake humility. "It is a heavy burden to take on the estate, especially with poor Garrett's condition declining so rapidly. But I do it for love. I do it for Terrence. We are going to build a future that honors the Freeman name." She paused, then tried it again with more tears in her voice. "It breaks my heart to see Garrett like this. But I promise to be a good steward of his legacy. I will protect him from himself." I listened to her practice her victory lap while my son lay in the dark, terrified and blind. I listened to her monetize our tragedy. She stopped at a liquor store on the way to the villa. She bought a bottle of champagne. Dom Perignon. She was going to celebrate on my grave. I turned off the audio. I had heard enough. I stood up and walked to the window of my hotel room. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and orange. It was time to get dressed. I didn't put on my old cardigan. I didn't put on the scuffed work boots. I opened my suitcase and pulled out the garment bag I had packed days ago. I took out a bespoke suit tailored on Savile Row charcoal gray wool that cost $5,000. I put on a crisp white shirt with French cuffs. I fastened them with cufflinks made of platinum and onyx gifts from the board of directors when I retired. I put on a pair of handmade Italian leather shoes. I dressed like the man I really was, the man I had hidden from her. I looked in the mirror. The bruise on my cheek was still there, a purple mark of her violence. I didn't cover it up, I wanted everyone to see it. It was my badge of honor. I checked my pockets. I had the remote control for the AV system. I had the original unsigned deed to the house. And I had the vial of poison residue I dug out of the trash. I was ready. I went downstairs and Ross was waiting in a black limousine. He looked at my suit and nodded. "You look like a CEO Garrett," he said. "I feel like an executioner," I replied. We drove to the villa in silence. The house was lit up like a beacon on the hill. Cars were already arriving. Luxury sedans, limousines, sports cars. My friends were here. The people who knew the real me. I saw Whitney's leased SUV pull up to the valet stand. She stepped out in her red dress looking like a movie star. She tossed her keys to the valet with a dismissive wave. She looked up at the house, her eyes hungry. She thought it was hers. She thought she owned the bricks, the mortar, and the land. She didn't know that she was walking into a courtroom and I was the judge, the jury, and the hangman. I watched her walk up the steps, her hips swaying, her head held high. She paused at the door, smoothing her dress, checking her reflection in the glass. She smiled. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated greed. "Walk in, Whitney," I whispered from the back of the darkened limo. "Walk in and take your bow." Ross tapped the glass partition. "It is time, Garrett." I opened the door and stepped out into the night. The air was cool and crisp. "Let's go," I said. I don't want to miss her speech. We walked toward the house, the gravel crunching under my expensive shoes. The music from inside drifted out. It was classical, soothing, and sophisticated. It was the soundtrack to a funeral, but Whitney didn't know she was the one in the casket. I reached the door and placed my hand on the handle. Showtime. The air inside the villa was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and the soft murmur of power. I stood in the shadows of the foyer, watching the scene unfold like a play I had written myself. Whitney was in her element, or at least she thought she was. She stood on the raised landing of the grand staircase, the blood-red dress clinging to her body like a second skin. She held a flute of champagne in one hand, and she looked out over the room with a hunger that was palpable. The room was filled with the titans of industry. There was Senator Phillips, who I had known since law school. There was Marcus Sterling, the CEO of the energy conglomerate who had personally signed off on my patents. There were judges and bankers, men and women who moved markets with a phone call. Whitney saw them as an audience for her coronation. She didn't realize they were a jury. She tapped a spoon against her glass, the sharp chime cutting through the room. Silence fell, but it wasn't the silence of respect. It was the silence of predators watching a wounded animal stumble into a clearing. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice trembling with a carefully practiced emotion. "It means so much to see so many of Garrett's old friends here tonight. As you know, this has been a week of terrible tragedy for the Freeman family." She paused, wiping a non-existent tear from her eye. She was good, I had to give her that. She had the cadence of a grieving saint down to a science. "My husband Terrence is fighting for his life in the hospital," she continued. "And my father-in-law Garrett, well, it breaks my heart to say it, but his mind is fading. The stress has been too much for him. He has made mistakes, terrible mistakes that have hurt this family deeply. But I am not here to assign blame. I am here to step up." She gestured to the empty space beside her where I was supposed to be standing, head bowed and broken. "Garrett has asked me to take over," she said, her voice gaining strength. "He has asked me to take the burden of the estate off his shoulders so he can rest. And I have accepted. I will protect the Freeman legacy. I will ensure that the patents and the properties are managed with the dignity they deserve. I will be the guardian this family needs." I watched the faces of the guests. Marcus Sterling took a sip of his drink, his eyes cold and hard. Senator Phillips whispered something to his wife, who shook her head with a look of pure disgust. They weren't buying it. They knew me. They knew the man who had built the legacy she was trying to steal. They looked at her not with admiration, but with the kind of clinical curiosity one reserves for a particularly interesting insect. She was so wrapped up in her fantasy that she didn't see the sharks circling. She didn't see that she was the only person in the room who didn't know the punchline of the joke. "I promise to lead with integrity," she concluded, raising her glass high, "to the future of the Freeman family." She waited for applause. It didn't come. Instead, there was a heavy, uncomfortable silence. A few ice cubes clinked in glasses. Someone coughed. Whitney's smile faltered. She looked around confused. Why weren't they clapping? Why weren't they cheering for the new queen? That is a beautiful speech, Whitney. My voice rang out from the back of the room clear and steady. It wasn't the voice of the confused old man. It was the voice that had commanded engineering teams on oil rigs in the middle of the North Sea. It was a voice that demanded attention. Whitney froze. She squinted into the darkness of the foyer. "Garrett," she asked, her voice uncertain. "Is that you? Come up here, Dad. Let them see you." I stepped out of the shadows. I walked into the light of the crystal chandelier. I wasn't stooped. I wasn't shuffling. I was wearing the bespoke charcoal suit. The platinum cufflinks caught the light. I walked with the long, confident strides of a man who owned the ground beneath his feet. A gasp went through the room, but it wasn't from the guests. It was from Whitney. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She looked at the suit. She looked at my face. She looked at the man she had never bothered to see. I walked through the crowd. The guests parted for me, nodding respectfully. Marcus Sterling raised his glass to me. Senator Phillips clapped me on the shoulder as I passed. I walked up the stairs until I was standing right next to her. I towered over her. Up close, I could see the cracks in her foundation. I could see the panic starting to bleed through the makeup. "You look different," she whispered, the microphone at her side, picking up her fear. "I look like myself," I said, my voice amplified by the room acoustics. I turned to the crowd. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "I know you were expecting a transfer of power, and you are going to get one. But not the one she thinks." Whitney grabbed my arm, her nails digging into the expensive wool of my suit. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "Stick to the script, old man. Sign the papers or I swear I will ruin you." I pulled my arm away, brushing off her touch like it was dust. "You wanted a show, Whitney," I said. "You wanted an audience. Well, you have one, and I think it is time we showed them exactly who you are." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the remote control. Whitney's eyes darted to the remote, then back to me. "No," she said. "No, whatever you are doing, stop it." I pointed the remote at the massive screen that had been set up behind us, concealed by a curtain until now. The curtain dropped. The screen flared to life. "This house has eyes, Whitney," I said. "It has had eyes since the day I bought it. I installed security cameras in every room to watch the contractors. I never turned them off." The image on the screen was crisp and clear, high-definition video of the kitchen. It was from the day of the party. It showed the marble counter, it showed the bottle of vintage Cabernet, and it showed Whitney. She was standing at the counter looking over her shoulder to make sure no one was watching. Her face was twisted in a look of intense concentration. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small glass vial. She uncorked the wine. She poured the contents of the vial into the bottle. She swirled it around. The room gasped. It was a collective sound of horror. On the screen, Whitney smiled a small, satisfied smile and recorked the bottle. "No," Whitney screamed. "That is fake. That is doctored." He made it up. I pressed a button on the remote. The video changed. Now it was just audio, but the waveform danced on the screen, matching the voices. It was the recording from her apartment. The quality was studio perfect thanks to the ductwork acoustics. "The sharks are circling." The lover's voice boomed through the speakers. "You owe $2 million. I know. Whitney's voice replied, shrill and desperate. "Why do you think I am doing this? He is the golden goose. I just need to wring his neck." Whitney staggered back, clutching her chest. She looked at the guests, who were now staring at her with open revulsion. She looked at Marcus Sterling, who looked ready to call in a tactical team. "The methanol didn't work," the lover said on the recording. "It was too messy," Whitney's voice argued. "It was supposed to look like a stroke." I pressed the button again. A new image appeared. It was a bank statement, a forensic accounting of her debts. It showed the online gambling losses. It showed the loans from shell companies linked to organized crime. It showed a negative balance of $2.1 million. And finally, I put up the last slide. It was the document she had made me sign earlier that day, the one she thought gave her everything. "Zoom in on the signature," I said into the microphone. The screen zoomed in. The jagged scrawl filled the wall. "Otisjenkins. Who is Otis Jenkins?" Marcus Sterling called out from the front row, his voice booming with authority. "Otis was my dog," I said, looking at Whitney. "He was the only creature I ever trusted blindly. And he has been dead for 5 years. Just like your chances of getting away with this, Whitney." Whitney looked at the screen. She looked at the signature. She looked at the video of herself poisoning the wine. The reality of what was happening finally crashed down on her. The walls weren't just closing in, they had already crushed her. She let out a scream that wasn't human. It was the sound of a wild animal caught in a steel trap. "You set me up!" she shrieked, lunging at me. "You planned this!" "You old bastard, you planned this whole thing." She reached for my face, her hands clawed into talons. But she never reached me. Ross stepped out from the side of the stage. He wasn't alone. 2 uniformed police officers stepped out with him, and behind them walked a man in handcuffs. It was her lover, Dave, the man from the recording. He looked defeated. He looked like a man who had already made a deal. Whitney stopped mid-lunge. She saw Dave. She saw the cops. "It is over, Whitney," I said, my voice calm and cold. "The police have the vial I found in the trash. They have the recordings. They have the testimony of your partner here who was very eager to talk once we told him you were planning to flee to Brazil without him." Dave looked at her with pure hatred. "You said you had the money, Whit. You said the old man was stupid." "He is not stupid," Whitney whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "He is the devil." I stepped closer to her until I was invading her space, just like she had invaded mine in the rain. "I am not the devil, Whitney," I said softly so only she could hear. "I am a father, and you tried to kill my son. You tried to take my life. You thought I was weak because I was kind. You thought I was poor because I was humble. You made the mistake of thinking you were the predator." I leaned in further, my voice dropping to a whisper that cut like a razor. "But you were just the meal." "Officer Taker," Ross said. The police officers moved in. They grabbed Whitney by the arms. She didn't fight. She went limp. The fight had left her. The arrogance had evaporated, leaving only a hollow shell of greed. They cuffed her hands behind her back. The click of the handcuffs echoed in the silent room. It was a sound more satisfying than any applause. She looked at me one last time as they dragged her toward the stairs. Her red dress was rumpled. Her hair was messy. She looked small. She looked pathetic. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why did you wait? Why didn't you stop me sooner?" I adjusted my cuffs. I smoothed the lapel of my $5,000 suit. "Because I wanted everyone to see," I said, gesturing to the room full of powerful witnesses. "I wanted to make sure there was no doubt. I wanted to make sure that when you go down, you stay down." They dragged her away. She didn't scream anymore. She just wept. Ugly, broken sobs that sounded like justice. I stood on the stage alone. I looked out at the sea of faces. My friends. My colleagues. The people who knew the real Garrett Freeman. I raised the microphone to my lips. "I apologize for the interruption," I said, my voice steady. "There will be no transfer of power tonight. The Freeman legacy remains in safe hands." The room erupted. It wasn't polite applause this time. It was a roar. Marcus Sterling started it, clapping his hands high over his head. Senator Phillips joined in. Then the whole room was on its feet cheering. They weren't cheering for a speech. They were cheering for the old man who had fought back. They were cheering for the victory of substance over style. They were cheering because they had just watched a masterclass in survival. I looked at Ross, who was standing by the exit watching the police cars flash in the driveway. He nodded to me a small salute of respect. I nodded back. I was tired. My bones ached. My heart was heavy for my son, who was lying in a hospital bed, blind and broken. But I was standing. I was standing tall in my own house, wearing my own suit, surrounded by the truth. The wolf was in chains. The sheep were safe. And the shepherd was back in charge. The silence in the grand ballroom was absolute, but it was the silence of a held breath before a scream. The video on the screen faded to black, leaving the image of my forged signature burning in the minds of everyone present. Whitney stood at the edge of the stage. Her chest was heaving. Her red dress, which she had bought to celebrate her victory, now looked like a bloodstain against the pale decor of the room. She looked at the guests. She looked at the screen. And then she looked at me. Her eyes had changed. The panic was gone. The calculation was gone. In their place was something primal and entirely unhinged. She realized in that split second that there was no way out. There was no lie she could spin, no charm she could deploy. The walls were not just closing in, they had already crushed her. And in that moment of total destruction, she decided that if she was going down, she was going to take the architect of her downfall with her. "You," she whispered. The word was a curse. Then she screamed. It was a sound that tore through the sophisticated atmosphere of the party like a jagged knife. It was a scream of pure entitlement denied. "You ruined everything," she shrieked. She moved faster than I expected. She didn't run away, she didn't collapse. She launched herself at me. She flew across the few feet separating us, her hands curled into claws, her nails aiming for my face. She wanted to erase me. She wanted to scratch the truth out of my eyes. "Garrett, look out!" Ross shouted from the side of the stage. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I had spent 40 years standing on oil rigs while storms raged around me. I wasn't going to back down from a greedy child in a red dress. She crashed into me. The force of her impact staggered me slightly, but I planted my feet. Her hands scrabbled at my lapels, tearing at the expensive fabric of my suit. She was screaming inarticulate sounds of rage, spitting and snarling. One of her nails caught my neck, drawing a thin line of blood that stung hot against my skin. "You were supposed to die," she screamed into my face, her breath hot and smelling of cheap champagne. "You were supposed to just die and leave us alone. Why didn't you die?" I grabbed her wrists. My hands were large and rough, calloused from decades of hard labor that she never respected. I squeezed. I saw the shock in her eyes as she felt the true strength of the man she had dismissed as frail. I forced her hands down, holding them away from me. "Because I have work to do, Whitney," I said, my voice low and steady amidst her chaos. She kicked out her sharp heel, connecting with my shin. Pain shot up my leg, but I didn't let go. She thrashed like a wild animal caught in a trap, trying to bite, trying to headbutt, doing anything to inflict pain. "Get off him!" the police officer yelled, rushing forward. Two officers grabbed her from behind, hooking their arms under her armpits and hauling her backward. She fought them too. She kicked the air, her heels flying off, landing on the stage with a hollow clatter. She was barefoot now, suspended between the officers, her hair wild, her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "It is his fault," she screamed at the crowd, at the judges and the senators who watched in horrified fascination. "He drove me to it. He is a miser. He hoarded everything. He watched us struggle. He made me do it." The officers dragged her toward the center of the stage, intending to take her down the stairs, but Ross stepped forward and held up a hand. "Wait," Ross commanded. The officers paused, holding the struggling woman firm. "We have one more guest," Ross said, his voice booming through the microphone. "A character witness who can clarify exactly who made who do what." The side doors opened again. The room turned to look. Two more officers walked in. Between them shuffled a man in handcuffs. He was wearing a leather jacket that looked expensive but tacky. His head was hung low. He looked defeated. He looked like a man who had realized that his only currency left was the truth. It was Dave, the lover. The man from the recording who had laughed about wringing my neck. Whitney went still. Her thrashing stopped. She hung in the grip of the officers, staring at the man she had planned to run away to Brazil with. "Dave," she whispered. Dave looked up. He saw the crowd, he saw the screen, and he saw Whitney, his face twisted with disgust. "You said he was stupid. Whit?" Dave said, his voice carrying in the silent room. "You said he was a senile old fool who wouldn't notice a thing. You said it was easy money." Whitney shook her head, her eyes wide. "Dave, don't say anything. I am not going down for murder alone," Dave spat. "I am not taking the fall for your plan. I didn't pour the poison. I just bought it. You were the one who put it in the glass. You were the one who wanted to pull the plug on your husband." "Liar," Whitney shrieked, struggling again. "You told me to do it. You said we needed the money for the cartel." "I said we needed money," Dave shouted back. "I didn't say kill your whole family. That was you. That was all you. You are a psychopath, Whitney. You looked me in the eye and said you earned that money by pretending to love them." The crowd gasped. The confession was absolute. It wasn't a recording. It wasn't a document. It was flesh and blood testimony spoken in front of 100 witnesses. Whitney sagged. The fight drained out of her, leaving only a hollow shell of disbelief. She looked at Dave, then she looked at the crowd. She saw the faces of the people she had tried to impress. She saw the disgust in their eyes. She saw the judgment. She realized that her performance was over and the reviews were in. "Get him out of here," Ross said, waving a hand. The officers turned Dave around and marched him out. He didn't look back. He had made his deal. He had saved himself by burying her. Whitney stood there barefoot and disheveled, held up by the police. She looked small. The red dress didn't look powerful anymore. It looked like a costume. Officer Ross said, handing a folder to the lead policeman. "Here's the warrant signed by the district attorney 10 minutes ago, and here's the chain of custody for the vial found in the trash." The officer took the folder. He looked at Whitney. He didn't look at her with pity. He looked at her like she was a problem to be solved. "Whitney Freeman." He said, his voice formal and heavy. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Terrence Freeman, the attempted murder of Garrett Freeman, fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and conspiracy to commit homicide." He spun her around. She didn't resist this time. She let him pull her arms behind her back. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was loud and final. Click, click, click. It was the sound of a steel door slamming on her future. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer intoned, reciting the words she had probably heard 1,000 times in movies, never thinking they would apply to her. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Whitney didn't listen to the rights. She was staring at the floor, her mind likely racing, trying to find a loophole, trying to find a way to spin this. But there was no spin. The screen behind her was still frozen on the image of her forged signature. The evidence was literally written on the wall. The officers began to march her toward the stairs. She stumbled, her bare feet catching on the carpet. She looked up and her eyes found mine one last time. She stopped digging her heels in. The officers paused. "Why?" she asked, her voice broken and small. "Why did you do it this way? Why didn't you just call the police at the beginning? Why did you let me humiliate myself?" I stepped closer to her. I adjusted my cuffs. I touched the scratch on my neck where she had drawn blood. I leaned in so that only she and the officers could hear me. But in the silence of the room, my voice carried to the front rows. "Because you needed to learn a lesson, Whitney," I said. "What lesson?" she spat, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "That you are mean, that you are cruel." "No," I said. "The lesson is about vision." I pointed to the screen behind us where the video of her pouring the poison had played. "You looked at me every day for 5 years," I said. "You ate at my table, you lived in my house, but you never saw me." "I don't know what you are talking about," she whispered. "You saw an old man," I said. "You saw a black man in cheap clothes. You saw a man who walked slow and talked soft, and because of that you decided I was stupid. You decided I was weak. You decided I was disposable." I straightened up, towering over her. "You let your prejudice blind you." I continued, my voice hardening into steel. "You thought because I didn't flash my money I didn't have any. You thought because I didn't shout I didn't have a voice. You looked at a man who built an empire with his bare hands and you saw a victim." I leaned closer, my face inches from hers. "You forgot the most important rule of survival, Whitney. Never underestimate the old black man who has been quiet for a long time. There is a reason he survived when others didn't. There is a reason he is still standing." Her eyes widened. She finally understood. She realized that her racism, her classism, her arrogance had been the very things I used to hang her. I had played the part she wrote for me, and she had clapped all the way to the gallows. "You aren't a victim," I said softly. "You are just a fool who picked a fight with a mountain." "Take her away," I said to the officers. They hauled her down the stairs. This time she didn't look back. She hung her head, her red dress trailing on the ground like a broken flag. The sound of her weeping echoed in the foyer until the heavy front doors slammed shut, cutting it off. Silence returned to the room, but it wasn't the awkward silence from before. It was a silence of awe. It was the silence of respect. I stood on the stage alone. I felt the weight of the last week crashing down on me. I was exhausted. My son was blind. My granddaughter was traumatized. My family was broken. But the cancer had been cut out. The threat was gone. Marcus Sterling stepped up to the edge of the stage. He raised his glass. "To Garrett Freeman," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The toughest son of a gun I have ever known." Hear, hear, the crowd roared, raising their glasses. I nodded, acknowledging them. But I didn't drink. I was done with toasts. I walked down the stairs. Ross met me at the bottom. "It is done," Ross said. "It is done," I agreed. "Now take me to the hospital. I have a son to heal and a granddaughter to raise." We walked out into the night, leaving the applause behind. The air was clean, the stars were out, and for the first time in a long time, the future looked clear. The legal system moves slowly, but when it finally strikes, it strikes with the weight of a mountain. The trial of Whitney Freeman was not the media circus she had hoped for. It was a cold, methodical dismantling of a narcissist. The prosecutor did not need to be theatrical because the evidence I had provided was overwhelming. The video of her pouring the poison played on repeat for the jury. The audio of her plotting my death echoed in the courtroom. And the testimony of her lover Dave sealed the tomb. Whitney sat at the defense table wearing a modest gray suit she had bought with the last of her stolen cash. She tried to play the victim one last time. She cried. She claimed she was coerced. She claimed she was suffering from postpartum depression even though Zuri was 6 years old. But the jury looked at her and they didn't see a victim. They saw the woman who had poisoned her husband and tried to murder an old man for a payday. The verdict took 4 hours, guilty on all counts. 2 counts of attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy, fraud, embezzlement. The judge was a woman of my generation, a woman who understood the sanctity of family and the horror of betraying it. She sentenced Whitney to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Whitney didn't scream this time. She just slumped in her chair, her eyes empty, realizing that the audience had finally left the theater. Dave took a plea deal for 30 years. He would be an old man before he saw the sky again. The fate of my son was a different kind of sentence. Terrence did not attend the sentencing. He sat in my living room, wearing dark glasses, listening to the news on the radio. The doctors confirmed that his sight would never fully return. He had shadows and light, but the details of the world were gone. He was living in a permanent dusk. He filed for divorce the day he was released from the hospital. He didn't ask for anything. He signed over the rights to the marital assets which were non-existent, and he petitioned for full custody of Zuri. The court granted it immediately given that the mother was a convicted felon. But the hardest part for Terrence wasn't the blindness or the divorce. It was the debt. The loan sharks Whitney had borrowed from didn't care that she was in prison. They wanted their $2 million. They came knocking on my door 3 days after the trial. They were polite, menacing men who thought they could intimidate an old engineer. I didn't call the police. I invited them in. I sat them down. I wrote them a check for the full amount. $2 million. It was a significant sum even for me. It hurt to write it, but I wasn't paying their debt. I was buying my son's life back. When they left, I walked into the kitchen where Terrence was sitting. I placed the canceled check on the table in front of him. "The debt is paid," I said. Terrence lowered his head. "Thank you, Dad. I don't know how I can ever repay you." "You will repay me," I said, my voice firm. "Every single cent." He lifted his head surprised. "I am not your savior, Terrence," I said. "I am your banker. You signed a promissory note this morning. You are going to pay me back. I don't care if it takes you the rest of your life. I don't care if you have to work 3 jobs. You are going to learn the value of that money." "But I am blind," he whispered. "How can I work?" "You have a brain," I said. "You have a degree. You have a voice. You will figure it out. I will help you with Zuri. I will put a roof over your head, but I am not giving you a free ride. That is what got us into this mess. I made it too easy for you. I let you think that money was magic. Now you are going to learn that money is sweat." Terrence sat there for a long time. Then he nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't whine. "Okay, Dad," he said. "I will pay it back." And he meant it. For the first time in his life, he understood that safety wasn't a gift. It was something you built. 6 months have passed since the day Whitney went to prison. The villa in the hills is gone. I sold it. I couldn't step foot in that house without smelling the bleach and the betrayal. I sold it at a loss, and I didn't care. It was blood money, and I wanted it washed clean. I moved Terrence and Zuri into my old house. It is crowded, but it is a good kind of crowded. It feels like a home again. I converted the dining room into a bedroom for Terrence so he wouldn't have to navigate the stairs. The dynamic of our lives has changed completely. I am no longer the silent observer. I am the captain of this ship. Terrence started a consulting business from the living room. He uses voice to text software to write code and analyze data. He works harder now than he ever did when he could see. He is up at 5 in the morning listening to market reports, typing furiously. He pays me $500 a week. It is a drop in the bucket of the $2 million he owes, but every time he hands me that check, I see a flash of pride in his face that I haven't seen since he was a boy. He isn't drowning anymore. He is swimming. But the real joy, the real victory is Zuri. She was traumatized. For weeks she wouldn't speak. She wouldn't eat unless I tasted the food first. She had nightmares about purple bottles and red cups. We spent hours in the garden. I taught her how to plant tomatoes. I taught her how to tell the difference between weeds and flowers. We got our hands dirty in the soil. One afternoon, while we were watering the roses, she looked up at me. "Pop, Pop," she said, "is Mommy coming back?" "No, baby," I said, kneeling down to be at her eye level. "Mommy is in a timeout, a very long timeout. She did bad things and she has to pay for them. Zuri nodded solemnly. She tried to hurt us. Yes, she did, I said. But she failed. Do you know why she failed? Because you are strong, Zuri said, touching the scar on my cheek. Because we told the truth, I corrected her. Lies are weak, Zuri. Lies break. The truth is strong. The truth is like this house. It stands up to the storm. She hugged me then. She buried her face in my neck and held on tight. And I knew then that we were going to be okay. She wasn't going to grow up like her mother. She was going to grow up like a Freeman. I established a trust for her. It is locked tight. Terrence can't touch it. Whitney certainly can't touch it. Zuri gets access when she turns 25, provided she finishes her education and proves she understands the responsibility of wealth. I am not making the same mistake twice. I am not handing over a legacy to someone who hasn't earned the strength to carry it. I sit on the porch in the evenings now. I watch Terrence navigate the yard with his cane, learning the landscape of his new world. He stumbles sometimes. He gets frustrated, but he gets back up. He doesn't call for me to help him. He figures it out. I watch Zuri playing with a new puppy we adopted, a rescue mutt named Justice. She laughs, and it is the best sound in the world. My friends at the club ask me why I don't travel. They ask me why I don't buy a yacht and sail around the world. I have the money. I have the time. I tell them I am busy. I am busy rebuilding. I learned a lesson that day at the housewarming party. I learned that you can't buy respect and you can't buy character. I learned that silence can be dangerous if you let people fill it with their own assumptions. I let Whitney assume I was weak. I let Terrence assume I was infinite. I was wrong on both counts. Now I am vocal. I am present. I am the guard at the gate. I keep the vial of residue on my desk. It is a reminder. It is a reminder that the people closest to you are the ones who can hurt you the most. It is a reminder that vigilance is the price of survival. But it is also a reminder of the night I saved my family. I took a glass of poison and I turned it into a cure. It burned down the lies. It burned down the greed. It burned away the rot that had infected my home. What is left is scarred. What is left is imperfect. But what is left is real. I am Garrett Freeman. I am 69 years old, and I am just getting started. I have a son to guide. I have a granddaughter to raise, and I have a legacy to protect. The wolf came to my door, and I didn't just survive. I wore her fur to the trial. And now when I pour a glass of wine, I drink it with my eyes open. I check the label, and I toast to the truth. Because the truth is the only thing that tastes sweet in the end. I learned that the greatest weapon against greed is patience. Whitney looked at my old clothes and saw poverty. She looked at my silence and saw weakness. She forgot that the strongest foundations are often hidden underground. My silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. True power doesn't need to scream to be heard. It waits for the right moment to speak the truth. And when it does, it doesn't just win an argument. It rebuilds a life. Never let anyone define your worth by what you choose to show them. Real wealth isn't the money in the bank, it's the legacy of character you leave behind. If you believe that the truth always finds a way to come to light, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to hide your true strength just to survive a toxic situation? I want to hear your story.